Survival meant a daily diet of poison and a steady stream of wicked deeds. At birth, the first sensation that registered was her mother's gentle voice, a gaze so adoring and tender it threatened to melt her heart. She believed herself blessed with a fortunate rebirth. That illusion shattered upon her first encounter with her father. He'd briefly appeared, bestowed a name, then promptly departed. "The child's name shall be Rosanna," he declared, his voice a chilling void of warmth. Rosanna clenched her small fists, a surge of anger rising within her. Was her mother blind? How could she have chosen such a despicable father? Yet, her mother continued to hold her close each day, a radiant smile illuminating her face, brimming with the hope that her daughter would quickly blossom into a distinguished Agrish. The Agrishes, the notorious Agrish family. In this world, they reigned as the most influential criminal empire. Theft, fraud, poison, even murder was committed without a flicker of remorse. The children born into this family were expected to perpetuate this legacy. But Rosanna possessed no aptitude for such practicalities. Utterly useless, her father had scoffed. "Since you possess some beauty, learn the art of seduction." Rosanna, sighing and rubbing her forehead, vented her frustrations to her brother. Rosanna had a gentle brother. He'd inherited their mother's blonde hair, blue eyes, and tender nature. Like a sweet, innocent puppy, he'd somehow managed to flourish amidst the depravity of their family, untouched by its taint. Upon hearing the decree that his sister should learn the art of seduction, he alone trembled and offered Rosanna comfort. He harbored deep anxieties for her, vowing to protect her, until the day of the family's special examination, when her brother, Az, failed. He was cast aside, discarded by the family. Rosanna, covering her mouth in horror, trembled from head to toe. In that moment, she resolved to become a formidable Agrish. Her father had numerous wives and a seemingly endless string of children. Only the 3 children who achieved extraordinary feats within a month were granted the privilege of dining with him. Rosanna had never held a place at that table, but witnessing her brother's abandonment changed everything. Sentimentality was a weakness, a fatal flaw in this family. A soft heart wouldn't allow a child to thrive. She'd assumed life would continue in this vein, but her reckless father had captured the protagonist's brother. To save him, Rosanna resorted to violence, landing a punch on her father. Anxiety gnawed at Rosanna. The captured boy was Cassius Padelian. Under the cloak of darkness, Rosanna decided to visit the cells. She politely requested the key from the guard. "My lady, that's impossible. The master forbids anyone from entering," the guard stammered, his face flushed. "I'm not going inside," Rosanna purred, effortlessly exuding her charm, causing the guard's heart to pound. "Are you really going to refuse me?" Rosanna offered a faint smile, and the guard completely succumbed. He hastily handed over the key. Seeing her open the door, the guard panicked. If the captain discovered this, he'd lose his head. "I'll just look at his face and leave." "There's no need to inform father," Rosanna reminded him, elegantly twirling the key. The click of her heels echoed through the prison corridor. Rosanna found Cassius in the iron cell at the end of the corridor. "This is too much," she thought, taking in his battered face. Such a handsome face, beaten beyond recognition. Cassius was her lifeline. She couldn't afford to lose him. In this world, this story was known as Hell's Flower. It chronicled the tale of Sylvia and her harem of male leads. Much of the content was not suitable for children. This was a world ruled by 5 families: black, gold, yellow, white, and red. Sylvia was a beautiful and charming young woman. Her tragedy began with her brother's disappearance. This boy, captured by her father, was Sylvia's brother. "Hey, Cassius Padelian," Rosanna called out, but he didn't respond. It seemed the drug was still taking effect. Rosanna didn't waste any time. She immediately forced a restorative potion down his throat. Cassius struggled, his eyes fluttering open. "A sick child who refuses medicine isn't very well behaved," she chided. Rosanna wasn't about to indulge his stubbornness. She clamped a hand over his mouth and punched him in the stomach. "This medicine is going down whether you like it or not," she declared. "And believe it or not, I'm actually trying to save you." To ensure Cassius took the potion. Rosanna knocked him unconscious. Looking at the slumped figure, she murmured a soft apology. The next day, Rosanna visited again. Cassis was awake. "What did you give me?" he demanded. Cassis didn't believe an Agrish could be capable of kindness. He assumed it was poison. "An antidote, of course," Rosanna replied. "Otherwise, your injuries would take 5 days to heal. What's your angle? Are you really saving me? What do you want in return?" Rosanna, of course, couldn't admit to having an ulterior motive. "Your name is Cassis Pedelian, isn't it?" Cassis gritted his teeth. "You know who I am, and you still dare to capture me? Are you one of the Agrish dogs, too?" Rosanna leaned closer, staring directly into his eyes. "Are you blind?" Clever as she was, Rosanna had guessed correctly. She deliberately waved a finger in front of his face. "How many fingers am I holding up? Get that away from me!" Cassis yelled angrily. Rosanna had no time to soothe his temper. She abruptly pulled open his shirt. "Just as I thought. You're not poisoned. You've been cursed. But it's only temporary." Rosanna breathed a sigh of relief. "Your sight will return. You won't be unable to recognize me later." Cassis blushed, biting his lip in embarrassment. Rosanna sharply tilted his chin up. "I genuinely don't want you to die. I'll see you tomorrow." With that, she turned and left, ignoring his calls for her to wait. Every day thereafter, Rosanna continued her visits, making herself a familiar presence. Each time, he'd either tell her to get lost or simply scoff and ignore her. He even refused the nutrient capsule she brought. Rosanna responded by punching him in the stomach. Apparently, this was the only way to get him to eat. "Hey, what are you doing?" Cassis hadn't expected her to suddenly resort to violence. "You have to eat," Rosanna said with a smile. "I was going to knock you out and feed you, but I guess I'm not strong enough." Cassis still wanted to know her name and her motive. Rosanna shoved the medicine into his mouth. This time, she left him with her name. "I'm Rosanna." Cassis looked at the beauty before him. Her name suited her. Her red eyes were a perfect match, like the fiery hues of dawn breaking after the darkness of night. Rosanna returned to her room and, as usual, drank a vial of poison. At that moment, her villainous younger brother came looking for her. The Agrish family's little puppy, currently obsessed with his older sister. Anyone who dared to steal her attention would face his wrath. In the novel, he was the one who would be corrupted and destroyed by the blackened heroine. "Sister Rosanna, have you been to the greenhouse to feed the poisonous butterflies?" He was interested in every detail of his sister's whereabouts. "Yes, there's only one egg left. This time, it has to succeed." The little puppy's face was a mask of displeasure. He didn't like anything that required his sister's blood to be fed. Rosanna tilted her head, looking at him. Despite being a villain, she sometimes found him endearing. "Sister, father won't let us near the new toy he brought back this time. He's not an ordinary person, is he?" "Indeed, he doesn't seem to be," Rosanna replied. From her words, the little puppy sensed his sister's interest in the captive. "What? Sister is interested too." Hearing her admit it, he decided to let her have him. Rosanna giggled, reaching out to pat his head, and he obediently bent down. Together, they went to the monthly grand dinner. Their father stood by the window, congratulating them on their achievements that month. His blood-red eyes, illuminated by the flashes of lightning, appeared both enchanting and terrifying. "You seem to be in a good mood today, father. Is it because of the prey you caught this time?" Rosanna initiated the conversation, aiming to claim ownership of the captive. "He's quite the prize. Are you interested in him too?" he asked, swirling his wine glass smugly. "Father is truly impressive," she said, offering insincere praise. "To see the noble Pedelian brought low is quite amusing." "Ha!" Their father, pleased by her words, declared the grand dinner over. "Sister, are you really going to train that toy?" The little puppy worried about losing his sister's attention. "I want to play with this toy." We agreed that he'd be mine from the start. That little redhead appeared out of nowhere. The little puppy stepped forward protectively, shielding his sister. But Rosanna wasn't one to hide behind her brother. Her face hardened. She intended to teach her little sister a lesson, not just with words, but with her own hands. The hairpin in her hand flew out. In the next second, Little Red Riding Hood was on her knees. In the Agrish family, there was no such thing as first come, first served. Possession belonged to whoever had the power to take it. After Rosanna left, Az, her devoted younger brother, stayed behind to deliver a warning to Little Red Riding Hood. He grabbed her red hair. If you want to take your anger out on someone, he hissed, go find that guy in the dungeon. He would manipulate this foolish younger sister to deal with anyone who dared to make him jealous. He had trained his poisonous butterflies well. Rosanna had to consume poison every day and feed the butterflies with her own blood. She needed this life-saving measure. Returning from feeding the butterflies, she heard a servant's report. The dungeon guards were down. Charlotte had not only harmed the captive, but had also blundered, causing the captive's restraints to break. It was clear that Jeremy, her younger brother, had put Charlotte up to this. Those restraints, specifically designed for magical creatures, wouldn't break easily. Rosanna guessed that Cassis had used Charlotte. This only piqued her interest in Cassis further. She happened to encounter her mother in the hallway. I heard you placed second this month. I'm so proud of you, her mother said with a smile, praising her for being a worthy Agrish. Yes, I strive to be what you expect of me, Rosanna replied, her face cold. She didn't want to face this gentle, yet weak, mother. Seeing her mother reminded her of her older brother, who had died young. I'm tired. Please excuse me. She returned to her room and closed the door, asking her maid to increase her poison dosage. In his cell, Cassis braced himself for his daily beating. He had already figured out the weaknesses of the chains binding him. As long as he remained calm, the restraint's effect could be minimized. He was certain Rosanna had realized they were useless now. The heroine's brother had been given to Rosanna as a birthday present by their father, perhaps due to his Pedelian bloodline. His gaze was haughty and arrogant. Their father's shoe ground into his face. Then, grabbing his hair, he handed him over to Rosanna. Thank you, father. She took the rope from her father's hand, promising to train him well. Wiping her hands, she ordered a servant to take him for treatment. She had no interest in playing with a battered pet. Watching Cassis being dragged away, she scoffed inwardly. Their father had never celebrated their birthdays, let alone given them gifts. This was the first time the eldest daughter had a toy. He was lucky. If he had fallen into the hands of any other sibling, his organs would probably have been dissected and fed to the dogs within days. Cassis closed his eyes, eavesdropping on the guards' idle chatter. He wondered which version of Rosanna was the real one, the one who protected him or the one who tormented him. Good day, madam. The guards greeted Rosanna's mother as she passed in the corridor. Looking at the battered figure they carried, she asked with concern, Who is this child? Is he dead? It's Miss Rosanna's toy. He fainted. Her mother looked horrified. Was Rosanna this cruel? Not Miss Rosanna. A servant clarified. Hearing this, the Duchess rushed forward, cupping the boy's face and crying out, as, seeing him, she was reminded of her deceased son. They beat him just like this. Madam, please withdraw your hand. You'll get blood on yourself. The guards quickly dragged Cassis away. Yes, quickly take him for treatment. The Duchess stood frozen. The guards' gossiping voices drifted back. Perhaps he was chosen as a toy because he resembles Miss Rosanna's brother. Only after he was thrown onto the floor did Cassis open his eyes, feigning unconsciousness. He had overheard some disturbing news along the way. Hearing the sound of a lock, he quickly closed his eyes again. He wondered who was coming this time. Only minimal treatment was given. Rosanna muttered to herself as she unlocked the restraints around his neck. Was it here? She asked, carefully applying medicine to his wounds. Seeing the beads of sweat on his forehead, she added, Even if it hurts, you have to bear it. Cassis, despite the stinging, kept his eyes closed. Rosanna rested his head on her lap and sighed. I don't want to die yet. And neither do you, right? Has anyone bathed you? You don't smell. Rosanna leaned closer, sniffing. She had a feeling he was feigning unconsciousness. To prevent him from suddenly overpowering her, she quickly laid down some ground rules. I'm sorry I couldn't help you earlier. I had to deceive my father. From now on, you belong to me. No one can touch you. Get well soon. Go back, Cassis, she added finally. It's rather ridiculous talking to someone unconscious. But I have to go. I'll come again later. She quickly left. After all, at this moment, Cassis was capable of attacking at any time. He sat up, looking bewildered. This was a strange woman. Rosanna returned with food, intending to cultivate a relationship with Cassis. Seeing him sitting on the bed, she was surprised. He had recovered so quickly. Noticing his wary and sharp gaze, she decided to lower his guard first. Are you feeling any other discomfort? You could have asked a servant to do this. He still felt like there was some scheme awaiting him. Rosanna lit the lamp, informing him that she had already asked asked the servants to prepare clothes. He still didn't dare to let the servants in. It would be troublesome if he controlled them and escaped. Your wounds are serious. You'll need painkillers. Tell me if you need them. Hearing her mention his wounds, he blushed and turned his head away. He had been awake when she applied the medicine last time. Remembering it now, he felt embarrassed. I'm your toy now. What do you need me to do? Cassis desperately wanted to know what this woman's purpose was. Then eat well, sleep well, get better quickly. He was shocked by her words. Could there be such a kind person in the Agrish family? When Rosanna returned, she brought clothes. Seeing him tear off his bloodstained clothes, she felt a little awkward. Although she had already seen his body while applying medicine, seeing his body again still made her feel embarrassed. That was why she had specifically chosen a room with a bathroom. He raised his chained hands, indicating he couldn't change clothes like this. Then let's change it to a neck collar. Hearing this suggestion, his face darkened. Was he being treated like a dog? Rosanna leaned in to change his chains, while he shyly turned his face away. It seemed he wasn't like the others, easily bewitched by her beauty. Annoyed, he devised another plan. I know a shortcut to the entrance. Seeing the surprise in her eyes, he smirked triumphantly. As she led him into the bathroom, she didn't forget to send her poisonous butterflies in to monitor him. Watching Cassis emerge from the bath, she gestured for him to sit down. She intended to apply the medicine herself. I've been doing this since I was a child. I'm quite skilled. He planned to use her brother's name to get close to her. Cassis became even more certain that he was only receiving this treatment because he resembled her brother. He exposed his upper body. Then take care of my back. I can handle the other areas myself. Truly beautiful, Rosanna thought as she carefully applied the medicine. If he had fallen into Charlotte's hands, she mused, he would surely be in a terrible state. Does it still hurt? She asked. Tell me if it does. I'll be careful. His muscles tensed with apprehension. Finally, he couldn't bear it any longer and turned, grabbing her hand. I'll do the rest myself. It seemed he was still wary, but much less so than before. I'll have the doctor come tomorrow. She decided to stop there, not wanting to push him too hard. The next day, Rosanna brought him lunch, fruit, bread, and soup. A rather lavish meal. It must be troublesome to come here personally every time. I'm just here to make sure you finish your meal. He raised a hand to wipe his sweat. He was so weak today that he was perspiring. In the next second, he lost his grip on the tray, shattering it. Blood spurted from his mouth. It seemed the increased dosage of poison was taking its toll. She rushed to his side to support him. Seeing him say he was fine, she exclaimed, "Fine? You're vomiting blood, and you say you're fine. This happens often. I just didn't want to ruin your appetite. Could it be you're worried about me?" He nervously played with his hair. Anyone would be startled seeing someone vomit blood in front of them. Huh, I didn't think it would scare anyone. It's a common occurrence for me. I didn't expect you to care about someone like me, Cassis said, preparing to leave. He didn't forget to apologize for startling her. Rosanna had just stepped out when she ran into her younger brother, Jeremy. He had come looking for her. He was startled to see the blood on her. Sister, why is there blood on you? That toy wasn't obedient, so I punished him, she said casually. Hearing that the blood belonged to Cassis, Jeremy relaxed. Don't bother wiping it off. You'll ruin your makeup. I'm not in a good mood. I'll go wash up in my room. Were you at the poisonous butterfly greenhouse, sister? You smell faintly of poison. Jeremy worried about her health, while she worried about the poison affecting Cassis. Can't you just throw away the butterfly bowl? The thought of her using her own blood worried him. Jeremy, if you interfere with me again, I'll be angry, she warned him coldly. I won't. I'm just worried. I heard it could be fatal. What you heard is correct. If the owner of the poisonous butterflies doesn't provide enough blood, they will be devoured. Seeing her brother's concern, Rosanna lowered her guard. As expected, only you care about me. She reached out to pat his head, but her hand was covered in blood. Jeremy didn't mind, leaning in to rub against her hand. He felt a flicker of relief. It was fortunate that 2 of the eggs had failed to hatch earlier. Otherwise, her blood surely wouldn't be enough. But Jeremy was mistaken. Rosanna had secretly hatched another. That night, as usual, she went to the greenhouse to feed the butterflies. As the fresh blood sprayed into the air, the swarm danced, a beautiful and bloody spectacle. The most unsettling person in the household appeared. It was her father's third wife. After feeding the butterflies, Rosanna had them scout for information about Cassis's subordinates. She encountered the third wife taking a stroll in the garden. Rosanna politely greeted her, and the woman generously complimented her beauty. Rosanna wanted nothing more than to avoid her, but the third wife extended an invitation for tea. It's been a while since I've seen Dean. Let's invite him too. The dean she spoke of was her father's eldest son, often away on missions. The young master has already left on an assignment from the master. She usually didn't care about her only son, always learning of his whereabouts from maids. It's wonderful that you can tell me things I don't know. But who allowed you to speak? With a smile, she swung her umbrella, and the gossiping maid's head flew off. Unfazed by the bloody scene, she casually ordered the other servants to dispose of the body as monster feed. Oh dear, I'm so sorry, Rosanna. Did any of that splatter on you? No, this was precisely why Rosanna disliked her. Wonderful. Let's have tea then. She offered the invitation again. Perhaps another time. I have other engagements. Rosanna politely declined. She would never willingly go to the third wife's room. Jeremy, having just finished interacting with his pets, happened upon the maids carrying the body. He kindly advised them to use a different feeding ground. However, they were somewhat confident in their own creatures' abilities. Jeremy inquired whose creatures they were. Hearing they belonged to the third wife, the maids allowed them to proceed. As long as they weren't Rosanna's, it didn't matter. He barely counted to 3 before the 2 maids came running out, their faces pale with terror. Jeremy laughed. They hadn't heeded his warning. Emerging from the feeding grounds, Jeremy saw the third wife, covered in blood, strolling through the garden. Auntie, you were just behaving for a little while, and now you're covered in another maid's blood. He waved his hand dismissively at the stench. Oh, Jeremy, are you looking for me? How lovely, she beamed. Which is better, no gift at all, or a poison gift? He was just on his way to see Cassis when one of his father's men came running with a gift. John, long time no see. Are your injuries from Charlotte healed? He remembered the names of every useful person in the household, a convenient way to curry favor. Why, yes, Miss Rosanna. John was honored to be remembered. Because I like you, miss. I brought you these flowers. Seeing her gentle demeanor, he blushed, his heart pounding. Rosanna accepted the flowers, inhaling their fragrance and offering polite thanks. The gift seemed to lift her spirits slightly. Cassis asked her, "Do you like flowers?" "Not particularly," she replied. "They're pretty, but they wilt too easily." "Do you want them?" she offered, holding the flowers out to him. "This room is so dreary. Flowers might brighten your mood. They were a gift for you." "Why would I want them?" he retorted, though his hand reached out instinctively. He was easily persuaded. A young lady's flowers aren't so easily accepted. The moment his fingers brushed against a petal, a tingling sensation shot through his hand. "Who gave you these?" He shook his hand, asking, "Do you often receive gifts like this?" Seeing her nod, he suggested, "Perhaps you should put them somewhere else. A little decoration is nice, but it's not good for a young lady to be constantly holding poisonous flowers. These are Greece modified poison flowers. So far, they only have a paralytic effect. They haven't been distributed outside the family yet." Rosanna watched him, a flicker of unease in her eyes. But he shouldn't know the flowers were poisonous. Her main purpose for visiting today was to deliver the map. Seeing her reach inside her collar, Cassis quickly covered his eyes. She wouldn't do anything to him, but he had only pulled out a map. "I have nowhere else to hide it," she explained. Seeing him blush at her teasing, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a small smile playing on her lips. She spread the map on the floor for him to memorize. Lest he doubt her, she offered to take him to verify its accuracy when the opportunity arose. Meanwhile, the third wife was still strolling in the garden. Jeremy, his face a mask of disgust, looked at her. "Eureka the monster feeding grounds," he said bluntly. "You just come from there yourself, haven't you? That's how it is in the Agrish family. Even family conversations are laced with barbs." She casually mentioned running into Rosanna, who had invited her and her son for tea. Jeremy visibly shuddered at the thought. The only one in this house who could be Rosanna's brother is me. He took his frustration out on a nearby rose. His sister had been spending less time with him ever since she got her new toy. And now, an outsider wanted to take up even more of her time with tea. The third wife, overhearing Jeremy's mention of Rosanna's new toy, grew even more excited. "Next time, I must invite her to bring her toy to my tea party." She eagerly anticipated that day. Jeremy turned and left, a shiver running down his spine at the thought of her peculiar habit of dressing up dolls. What kind of father forgets his own son's name? He saw that Cassis had memorized the map. To leave no evidence, he burned the map before leaving. He looked at the flowers on the bed, feeling a pang of sympathy for Cassis. He seemed unaware of the poison. Even his own body carried the faint scent of toxins. His father had actually sent his daughter such a thing. He then recalled Cassis coughing up blood in front of him. Despite the restraints limiting his power, he crushed the flowers into dust. Leaving the cell, Rosanna went to see her father. He asked if she had trained her toy well. He still has some thorns, but he's more obedient than at first. I'm even more pleased knowing it was a gift from father. Landagrish was delighted with his daughter's response. She was becoming more and more like him. As a child, she had shown no such promise. His daughter, however, was simply lying to him. He thought of his useless son. What was his name again? Al, was it? A coward who had only brought him trouble. Rosanna barely contained her fury as she listened to him disparage her beloved brother. That discarded brother was named as. But there was no need for their father to remember someone who had been punished and died. As means nothing to me. Agrish is my pride. I resemble my esteemed father more than anyone. She bowed and excused herself, a smile plastered on her face. After leaving her father, she drank a vial of poison, collapsing onto the sofa in exhaustion. Her butterflies returned with their gathered information. Her butterflies returned with news of Dean. His mission to the border was his first, searching for Cassis's subordinates. Rosanna, seeing Dean's image, sat up in alarm. He was her father's favorite, consistently ranking first in the monthly evaluations. He was coming back. The thought filled her with a sense of foreboding. She needed to tell Cassis. Arriving at the dungeon, she hesitated. Perhaps it was better not to tell him. His family wouldn't give up easily on finding their beastkin. She could find another opportunity to pass along the message. For now, she could only encourage him to recover quickly. How terrifying could his older brother be? Though her words expressed concern, they sent a chill down his spine. Returning from feeding her poisonous butterflies, she found herself drenched by the rain. The thought of visiting Cassis vanished. A sudden chill at her back made her turn. There stood her brother as, "You're injured," he observed, his voice laced with concern. Was it the poisonous butterflies? She took a step back, putting distance between them. "When did you get back?" she asked. The two stood dripping in the hallway. "Just now." He grasped her wrist. "I heard you haven't even hatched a single egg." His words were gentle, but his grip was tight. Rosanna wrenched her hand free, her eyes wary. "I hear Cassis has become your new toy," as continued, admitting he was only concerned for her because of the rumors. The news traveled fast. Rosanna didn't appreciate his concern. She wanted to leave. She found herself at Cassis's cell. He was training, desperate to recover and escape. He looked up, startled, as Rosanna entered, drenched and distraught. He reached out a hand, but she flinched. She was still reeling from the encounter with Dean, her cold, unfeeling brother. Cassis's voice brought her back to the present. She hadn't even realized she'd come here. "Let's stop the bleeding," she said, noticing his wound was still open. She couldn't ignore it. He wanted to return to his room to clean up, but fear of the enemy kept him trapped. "Sit on the bed," Rosanna instructed. "I'll help you." She draped a blanket over Cassis to ward off the chill, but he avoided her gaze, his ears burning red. "You said you were good at bandaging," she remarked. "This is terrible. Let me help." As she reached out, Cassis seemed unusually docile. She suspected his gentleness stemmed from his value of family, a weakness she could exploit. "You remind me of my brother," she murmured. He finally snapped, pushing her down. It was a desperate act of self-preservation, but it was enough. His heart pounded in his chest. "Help me," he pleaded. Until now, Cassis had been eerily calm. "Neither of us is safe here," Rosanna said. As a precaution, she added, "Don't hate me," before initiating intimacy. Blushing furiously, he pulled her up by her collar, careful of her injured arm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Even if you don't want this, just bear with it a little." She leaned in again. Cassis, flushed crimson, didn't resist this time. It was a ruse, meant to leave marks of abuse on him, a deception for others. Passing through the garden, Rosanna saw her father and Dean together again. They seemed more like true father and son. As she passed, Dean glanced her way. Ever since he'd seen his sister cry as a child, he'd been obsessed with making her weep. But she could never like Dean. He was the one who had executed her brother. And he was the only one who had seen her tears, the tears she shed on the path to becoming a true Agrish. The test of becoming a true Agrish involved executing the person closest to you. Her brother, Az, had failed that test and paid with his life. Az had failed to execute the person closest to him and lost his life as a consequence. Rosanna, to prevent Az from falling at Dean's hands twice, had tearfully struck down the illusion of her brother in the trial, securing her own survival. The third wife's tea party was unavoidable. Jeremy had recently apologized, stammering about mentioning Cassis to the third wife, terrified of Rosanna's anger. As expected, the invitation arrived swiftly requesting guests bring their pets. Rosanna had no intention of bringing Cassis. This was her second time attending the third wife's tea party. The third wife, all smiles, beckoned her to sit closer. Shauna, I didn't know you'd be here. You should have told me beforehand. Sheila, Rosanna's mother, was also present. Though terrified of the third wife, she never dared refuse an invitation. I kept it a secret on purpose, the third wife purred. Isn't it a lovely surprise, Sheila? It's a shame Shauna didn't bring her toy, the third wife continued, feigning disappointment. I caught a glimpse of him last time. Quite the looker. I was so looking forward to seeing him again. I even prepared a special cage. Rosanna could only offer the excuse that her toy was shy and prone to biting anyone but her. It seems you haven't drugged him yet, another guest remarked. Rosanna slammed her teacup onto the saucer, a subtle display of displeasure. If they become too docile, you grow bored quickly, don't you? Then you dispose of them. I've finally found a toy I'm interested in. I like to keep him around a bit longer, she replied, maintaining a polite smile. Sheila, shrinking under the weight of these callous words, feared for her daughter. The other guests, oblivious, continued their cheerful chatter, exchanging tips on taming their pets. The third wife clapped her hands, signaling for a pause. It was time to unveil her new doll. The doll, brought before them, was a human, modified, their throat rendered incapable of speech. The third wife, beaming, presented the doll to Sheila. Isn't she much lovelier than the last one? Sheila, trembling with fear, forced herself to agree, her voice barely a whisper. To acknowledge Sheila's compliment, the third wife ordered the doll to pour her tea. The doll, hands shaking violently, could barely hold the teapot steady. Hot tea splashed across the table. The doll recoiled in terror. Rosanna, knowing her hostess's temperament better than anyone, braced herself. The third wife, while feigning concern for Sheila, prepared to punish the doll. To protect her timid mother, Rosanna accidentally dropped her own teacup. "Oh dear, I've been so clumsy," she exclaimed. "Look, your hand is getting quite red. You should have a physician look at that immediately," the third wife said, belatedly realizing her oversight. "How thoughtless of me. We can't have you scarring that beautiful skin." Rosanna signaled for a servant to escort her mother away, eager to distance Sheila from the macabre display. That an Agrish son would actually save someone, all for his sister. Jeremy, encountering Cassis, who had been sent by Dean, disgusted by the tea party, lashed out, stomping a guard's head beneath his heel. "You fools! How dare you sneak around here?" he roared. "Get up and come with me. We're going to see my sister and get to the bottom of this." He hadn't meant to kill the guard, but the blow had been fatal. The mere thought of someone coveting his sister's belongings enraged him. Then he noticed the marks on Cassis's neck. His headache intensified. Had his sister already? "Hey, you mongrel, come here," he growled, struggling to maintain his composure. Cassis sneered. "Why should I listen to you?" Jeremy's last shred of control snapped. He lunged, fist connecting with Cassis's face. "I was going to let you go," he snarled, "but you ignored my generosity." He took a deep breath. He couldn't kill Cassis outright. Rosanna would be furious. It would be better to frame him for attempting to escape. "The Ching mongrel is escaping," he shouted. No one could stop him now. He had a legitimate reason to attack. The two began a deadly dance, Cassis's agility proving a match for Jeremy's fury. Frustrated, Jeremy unleashed his beast. The tea party, barely halfway through, descended into further chaos. A guard rushed in, breathless. "He's escaped. Your toy, he's gone." "What do you mean escaped?" Rosanna demanded, her voice dangerously low. "My toy can unlock his own restraints now. He broke free of the ropes to bring him to the tea party," the guard stammered. Rosanna's fingers tightened around her teacup, crushing it to powder. "How could they act without my orders?" Rosanna's fury was palpable. The guard, scrambling to appease her, hastily explained, "It was young Master Dean's command. We assumed you had given your consent, Mississippi." Shards of a shattered teacup pierced the guard's knee, forcing him to kneel. "Before I remove your head," Rosanna hissed, "tell me where you last saw Cassis." "The South Corridor, Mississippi. Young Master Jeremy is in pursuit. I must go." As Rosanna turned to leave the garden, the ground trembled. Even here, monsters attacked. Rosanna swiftly gathered her hair, preparing to fight. Meanwhile, Cassis, under attack by a monster, found himself unexpectedly saving the very guards sent to capture him. Even towards an Agrish, his inherent kindness prevented him from abandoning someone in danger. "Are you a cockroach?" Jeremy sneered, observing the scene. Still alive and kicking, I see. Jeremy, seemingly oblivious to his own role in unleashing the monsters, offered a backhanded compliment. Not bad, he conceded. Just then, Dean, the true culprit, arrived. Casually slaying a monster, Dean surveyed the chaos. "Are you walking your dog?" he mocked. Quite the spectacle. Cassis and Jeremy exchanged a look. The real trouble had arrived. Handsome as he was, Dean's heart was dark. Any toy that captured his sister's attention was destined for disposal. Dean's resemblance to their father was striking. If not for the youthful fullness of his face, Cassis would have mistaken him for Lant Agrish himself. After a dismissive glance at Cassis, Dean turned his attention to Jeremy, his tone laced with condescension. "You opened the gate to the feeding grounds, didn't you?" Still as witless as ever. "Causing trouble again. You should really get a haircut. You'd look much cuter. Honestly, everything you do is so unrefined." Insulted, Jeremy rose to his feet, pointing an accusing finger at Dean. "It's your fault. You ordered them to take my sister's toy." Dean ignored him completely, his gaze fixed on Cassis. A Qing noble, so besotted with a woman. Intriguing. "I was dealing with some hounds at the border the other day, searching for their master, it seems. A bit of a nuisance to dispose of." Cassis, realizing Dean was casually admitting to executing members of his family, raised his weapon. "What's the matter? I simply sent them on ahead." Dean effortlessly deflected Cassis's spear thrust. His movements were fluid and graceful. "Not bad," he commented, "a bit more clever than the other dogs." "Why don't you attack me yourself?" Cassis questioned. "I don't have the authority to punish you," Dean replied. So he was simply drawing him out, making him an easier target. Just then, Sheila, searching for Rosanna, stumbled upon the confrontation. Spotting a monster behind Dean, she cried out a warning. Cassis saw an opportunity to escape, but as Dean sidestepped the monster, it lunged towards Sheila. "You're insane," Jeremy shouted. "Are you trying to kill my sister's mother?" Too late for Jeremy to intervene, Cassis abandoned his escape, hurling his spear through the monster's head. He saved Sheila's life, but in doing so, left himself vulnerable. Dean's spear struck the restraints on Cassis's wrist. Agonizing currents surged through his body. "Don't move, Dean commanded. Sheila, terrified, covered her face, the image of her executed son flashing before her eyes. Rosanna arrived just in time, using her hair ornament to shatter Dean's weapon. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. Dean, after receiving a swift slap across the face from his furious sister, finally seemed pleased. Having lost a brother herself, Rosanna valued the lives of those around her. Knowing her maid's abilities came at the cost of her own life force, Rosanna ordered her protector not to use her powers. Her half-sister also arrived to deal with the monsters. Unarmed, she tore apart the third wife's pet cages with her bare hands. She suspected Jeremy's mischief. "Your toy might be next. You'd better hurry," she advised Rosanna, who then rushed towards Cassis's location. She hadn't anticipated Dean's involvement, nor her mother's presence. "Why is Jeremy's mother here?" Rosanna wondered. "She must have come out because she was worried about me." The third wife, following close behind, looked at the trembling Sheila with more concern than anyone else. "Sheila, were you hurt by the monster? Did Dean kill it?" "Good job, Dean. You've never been so sensible in your life." He watched his mother's concern for another with icy indifference. "Sister," Jeremy interjected, his voice thick with anger. "Dean threw the monster at Mother." Overcome with emotion, Sheila fainted. Seeing Cassis on the ground, she was reminded of her son, who had met a similar fate. The third wife also reproached her son. "Dean, why did you do that to Az?" she questioned, a surprising gentleness in her voice, so unlike the woman who casually ordered the punishment of servants. Rosanna slapped Dean hard across the face. "Stealing my things wasn't enough? You even put Mother in danger. I won't forgive you." "Oh, how cruel!" Dean chuckled, a chilling sound. He covered his face, a sinister smile twisting his lips. "This is how you repay someone for catching your runaway puppy." "I didn't ask you to," Rosanna spat. "Even if I were to punish him, it's not your place. Get your foot off him." Dean's hand drifted to his cheek. "It's been a while since I've seen you this angry," he mused. "I'm in a good mood. Let's end this here for today. However," he added, a cruel edge to his voice, "it would be even better if you cried like you used to." Jeremy, watching Dean walk away, seethed with rage. "I won't let you get away with this," he threatened. Later, a maid reported the outcome of the incident. Those who had relayed messages had become victims of the monsters. There was no one to confirm that Dean had acted without authorization. Rumors circulated that the third wife had used Dean's name. Wanting to remove Rosanna's toy, she had disposed of anyone involved, hoping to cover her tracks. But no one knew that it was Rosanna herself who had used Dean's name to bring Cassis out. The map she had given him was fake. This was all to show him how difficult escape would be without her help. Yet, he had been captured, saving her mother. "Let's confine him to the Hall of Illusions," Rosanna decided. The Agrish family's only innocent flower had finally awakened. Having barely recovered from the monster attack, Sheila longed to see her daughter. Still too shaken to stand, she had to send a maid with a message. "I heard monsters got into the greenhouse. Are you all right? Calm down, mother. I'm Euphine. But how did you get out of your room? Didn't you hear the monsters escaped from the feeding grounds? I couldn't stay there, thinking about you." "Thank you for your concern, mother," Rosanna replied, her voice laced with a chilling indifference. "But you're truly a hindrance. Not only are you unable to help, you can't even get out of bed." Rosanna sighed, rejecting her mother's affection. "Did you ever consider that someone might try to escape and take you hostage? Don't think about helping me. Think about not becoming a burden. That way, I won't consider you a nuisance." With that, Rosanna left. A maid arrived, announcing her father's return. She had to see him before anyone else. "Father, I have good news." Waiting for him in the stairwell, she told him about releasing her poisonous butterflies. Though they had hatched long ago, she wanted to make this event meaningful. "Have you decided on their purpose?" he asked. "Of course, butterflies of slaughter. I will make them a powerful weapon for the Agrishas." "How glorious!" Lamp beamed. When pleased, he wasn't stingy with his praise. "Rosanna, I've always had high hopes for you." After leaving her father, she encountered Dean in the hallway, also on his way to see their father. The sight of him ignited her fury. "It's a shame I only slapped you once. What if Cassis hadn't saved her? What would have happened to Mother?" "Nothing," Dean whispered in her ear. "Didn't I tell you? I love seeing you cry." "What a pity," Rosanna retorted, a chilling smile playing on her lips as she gazed at her reflection in a nearby mirror. "You won't see that before you go to hell." Suppressing her true emotions, Rosanna reveled in the knowledge that she was finally becoming the Agrish her mother had always wanted. How utterly repulsive, she thought, her mind turning to Dean's machinations. He had orchestrated the entire incident, leaving Jeremy to shoulder most of the blame. "I hadn't intended for Jeremy to be confined to the punishment chamber," she mused, "but he foolishly opened the door to the monster feeding grounds. Who else could I blame? He played with me when we were children." She remembered, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "For the sake of my plans, I couldn't visit him. I couldn't offer him any help. Others were sent to replenish the monster feeding grounds for overstepping their boundaries and interfering with my property," she thought, a cold satisfaction settling in her chest. "It's not really a punishment," she realized. "It's just Father's little trick, allowing them to reflect while doing what needs to be done. But that knowing look in his eyes, while pretending ignorance, makes me loathe him even more," she seethed, her thoughts returning to Dean. Cassis, thrown into the Hall of Illusions, found long-buried memories surfacing from the depths of his mind. He remembered being restrained, unable to control his own power, and Rosanna casting a spell to nullify the illusion's effects on him. Then, she entered the illusion herself, her face a familiar sight in the swirling chaos. "Don't be alarmed," she had said. "This is just an illusion. I'm just a figment of your imagination." "Thank you for saving my mother," she whispered, her voice surprisingly gentle. "If you were truly a terrible person, it would make things so much easier for me." She held him close, her words of gratitude a soothing balm. Comforted by her presence, Cassis drifted off to sleep. Rosanna, going to check on her pet, received a special gift from the third wife at the door. It wasn't just a painting. It included a vial of aphrodisiac and a note inviting her to bring her pet to the next tea party. Rosanna quickly covered her nose, realizing that the incident had exposed the marks on Cassis's neck to many prying eyes. "How is your mother?" Cassis asked, his gaze fixed on the poisonous painting in Rosanna's hand. His demeanor had softened considerably, indicating he now recognized her as an ally. "She was just frightened. Nothing serious," Rosanna reassured him. "The one who triggered my restraints that day, it was Dean Agrish, wasn't it?" Cassis growled, his voice laced with venom. That man, he enjoys inflicting pain, both physical and emotional. Did you know he deliberately set the monsters on your mother? Cassis asked. I know, Rosanna replied, her voice flat. But what can I do? This is the Agrish way. But I have two pieces of good news for you, she continued. One is about the hidden realm I mentioned before. It's about to open. It only opens at specific times, she explained. The other is that I found several people at the border who resemble your family. The leader is about 30 years old, with brown hair and a green eye covered by an eye patch. Do you recognize him? Where did you find them? Cassis asked, a spark of hope flickering in his eyes. The southeastern border, Rosanna replied. If you can give him something to confirm your identity, it should be helpful. Cassis then requested a flower, using his blood to leave a coded message on its petals before handing it to Rosanna. We both know we can't trust each other right now, Rosanna stated, her voice devoid of warmth. To me, your actions don't seem to stem from genuine kindness. But you have helped me, and I should thank you for that, she admitted, a rare display of sincerity. No one had ever thanked him before. No one had ever spoken to him with such genuine honesty. His heart pounded in his chest, and he quickly turned away, murmuring his thanks. It's too soon, Rosanna warned. You're still in Agrish. I've been meaning to ask you, Cassis began. You know these flowers are poisonous. Why do you accept them? Rosanna recalled the moment she collapsed, the genuine panic she felt, a sight she would never allow her enemies to witness. Yet Cassis had seen it. When she felt unwell, her first instinct was to hide in his cell. You know what these flowers represent? Cassis pressed. Do you still accept them? Faced with his question, Rosanna chose to feign ignorance. No, she lied. I don't know what these flowers are. These flowers are poisonous, Cassis insisted. I don't know the specific type, but they are highly toxic. How do you know? Rosanna asked, her grip tightening on the flower basket. I've seen this type of flower before, Cassis replied. These are definitely poisonous. This revelation startled Rosanna. The flowers were a unique Agrish breed, not yet circulated to the outside world. How could he have possibly seen them before? It doesn't matter if you don't believe me, Cassis continued, his brow furrowed with concern, but at least be wary. Even if you don't want to throw them away, keep them at a distance. This is for your own good, he added, his earnest expression and caring words betraying his fear that she wouldn't believe him. Rosanna knew he was also hiding something. She couldn't fathom how he'd recognized the poisonous flowers, but she needed to at least appear to trust him. I believe you, she said, her voice carefully neutral. There's no need to lie to me about this, is there? The next day, Rosanna emerged from the greenhouse, exhaustion clinging to her like a shroud. She dispatched her butterflies to monitor Dean and instructed them to search for Cassis's people. She'd also had to spill her own blood to nourish the poisonous butterflies. She was utterly drained. Just then, Charlotte, freshly released from the punishment chamber, appeared, looking for trouble. I heard your toy tried to escape, she sneered. Rosanna plastered a smile on her face, though inwardly she seethed with irritation and disgust. Your complexion is much better than before, she observed coolly. It seems the punishment chamber was quite comfortable for you. Why didn't you stay there a few more days? She added, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Charlotte bristled, utterly indignant. This sister of hers could infuriate her with a single sentence. Big Brother was turned upside down by your toy, Charlotte spat. You're truly negligent as his owner, she continued, her voice rising. If it were me, I would have broken his legs from the start. Rosanna watched her performance with an air of detached amusement. Squabbling was so tiresomely childish. Father allowed you to have a toy, Charlotte raged, but he locked me up and made me wait. You did that on purpose, didn't you? You filthy liar. Oh, really? Rosanna purred, her voice laced with mockery. You fell for such an obvious trick? You're a fool. And this time, when your toy escaped, you used underhanded methods to avoid responsibility, didn't you? I bet that whole hatching poisonous butterflies thing is a lie, too, Charlotte shrieked. You're the one who should be locked up, scheming to please Father. Father might be fooled, but I won't be. I'll take back my toy, no matter what it takes. Rosanna decided it was time to administer some discipline. Empty heads were easily swayed. A few days in the punishment chamber wouldn't magically grant Charlotte intelligence. Very well, Charlotte, Rosanna said, her voice dangerously soft. You don't believe me? I'll let you see for yourself. With a flick of her wrist, she summoned her poisonous butterflies. She would let Charlotte witness firsthand how the butterflies could devour a person whole. Charlotte, Rosanna said, her voice chilling, I despise unintelligent children. I do hope you won't disappoint me again. Charlotte, paralyzed with terror, collapsed to the floor. That should keep her subdued for a while. Rosanna fled, desperate to avoid being seen in her weakened state. She stumbled into Cassis's cell, collapsing as blood welled in her throat. Her vision blurred, and tears streamed down her face. Her body, pushed to its limits, finally gave way. Rosanna, Cassis, his alarm evident, ripped off his restraints and rushed to her side. Even in her weakened state, Rosanna worried about him. "It's dangerous if you escape and get caught again," she whispered. He was saving her life, and yet she felt as if he were risking his own. The memory of Dean's cruel words and actions made the Agrish way seem all the more twisted. Law and ethics held no sway here. Anyone who stayed in this place long enough would become warped. She remembered how Rosanna had thanked him, a genuine smile gracing her lips for saving her mother. If he escaped, would she be in danger? The more he dwelled on it, the more conflicted he became. Seeing her collapse before him, he'd been terrified that she was still surrounded by the poisonous fumes. Rosanna, fearing he would use this opportunity to escape, struggled to raise a hand. "It's dangerous out there," she rasped. "I'll protect you." She reached for him, wanting to stop him from leaving. "Go find a doctor now." He grasped her outstretched hand. "No," she murmured, her voice fading. "No one can see me like this." With that, she lost consciousness. The butterflies hovered around her, menacingly. It seemed they might attack at any moment. Sensing her weakening breath, Cassis couldn't abandon her. Breaking through the restraints within himself, he leaned close to her face and began to purify the poison from her system. As their lips met, a surge of vitality coursed through Rosanna. She stirred, raising a hand weakly as if to protest. Seeing the desperate resolve in his eyes, the way he seemed prepared to sacrifice everything, she understood why he couldn't abandon her. Witnessing his ability, a forgotten detail suddenly struck her. Both she and Cassis possessed a peculiar power. According to the family lore, a kiss could restore vitality, heal wounds, and achieve other, more intimate effects. That was why she had become a coveted prize, a plaything to be imprisoned by other families. Was this a hereditary ability of the Petalian family? It also explained how he had identified the poisonous herbs, while his actions had erased the effects of the poison she'd ingested. It also threatened to undo all her careful work, rendering the poison she'd consumed useless. Without her toxicity, could she even survive in this family? Seeing his concern, Rosanna reassured him. "I'm all right. I'll protect you until you escape." He mistook her words, thinking she was acting out of sibling affection. "Why are you saying this to me? I'm not your brother." Of course, she knew he wasn't her brother. She was merely trying to evoke his empathy. They weren't alike at all. She was simply trying to avoid becoming complicit in his fate, seeking a path to survival for both of them. "You're nothing like Az," he said, his mood darkening. "Please don't misunderstand." He loathed his enemies, and Cassis, using Az as his weakness, was one of them. He also loathed himself for unknowingly revealing his true feelings in front of her. It was ironic. Who was protecting whom? She was such a fool. He found himself growing increasingly concerned for the Agrish princess. Saving her life wasn't enough. He wanted to give her a pleasant dream, a chance to recover properly. A rosy dream filled with falling flower petals, where her beloved brother, Az, was there to comfort her. Within the warmth of the dream, Rosanna slept peacefully. He remained by her side, silently wiping away the tears that still lingered on her cheeks. "Sleep until you're fully recovered," he whispered. He knew he would feel awkward returning to her cell after this. After all, he had seen her at her most vulnerable. Later, someone arrived. "I've come to deliver a message. It seems to be coded." Seeing the relief wash over Cassis's face, it seemed to be good news. After reading the message, he noticed the butterflies fluttering around Rosanna. "Those are the poisonous butterflies, aren't they?" he asked, a flicker of worry in his eyes. He was suddenly concerned they might lose control. They had appeared without being summoned. Could it be because they had tasted her blood when she collapsed in front of him earlier? They weren't raised as killing butterflies, so surely they wouldn't be dangerous. He watched them circling her. "They seem to want my blood," he observed, a hint of unease in his voice. Rosanna nervously clutched her arm, trying to hide the fact that they were drawn to her. "Surely not. They only drink my blood. I'm only asking because I'm worried," she added, meeting his gaze. He felt a prickle of annoyance. If I escape from this place, he asked, his voice low, will you be in danger? What? His question was unbelievable. He was worried about her in this situation. I'm not a fool, she thought, her irritation flaring. Her reason for helping him escape was to secure her own survival. Did he really think she was making a selfless sacrifice? I'll return that question to you, she said coolly. You're the one who's mistaken me for your sister. You're worried about your sister's future, aren't you? His look was almost condescending. Can't I be worried about you? His words sent a jolt through her, a strange fluttering in her chest. She had thought she held the upper hand in their relationship, but somewhere along the way, their positions had shifted. Deliberately avoiding his gaze, she said, I've already devised a plan. I'll tell you the details later. I've taken the Pedalians to a safe place. You can meet up with them later. While her goal was indeed to save him, she was lying to him once again. In her plan, Cassis's survival was all that mattered. Her reassurances were merely a means to an end. She intended to lure his men to the Black Forest Swamp, a place teeming with dangerous monsters. He seemed to know why the Agrishas in the novel so cruelly imprisoned and abused Cassis. His very existence was an anomaly within the Agrish family, a circle forced into a world of triangles. He didn't belong. She cursed herself. She should have shrugged off his hand when he wiped away her tears. Biting her lip, Rosanna hardened her resolve. She had to make him disappear from her life, and quickly. She couldn't afford to be swayed by him any longer. The day was unseasonably warm. Rosanna brought a refreshing drink for her butterflies as the guards watched them feast on corpses, gulping nervously. If you don't hurry and fill their bellies, she said, her voice laced with a chilling indifference, they might start looking for other sustenance. The maids whispered amongst themselves. The young mistress seemed better lately, but like her poisonous butterflies, she was both beautiful and terrifying. Rosanna glanced at them dismissively, then looked away. She had more pressing matters to attend to. Cassis came to mind. He had the power to escape, yet he remained. Was it concern for her that kept him here? The thought was unsettling. Lance's arrival startled her from her reverie. How are the poisonous butterflies progressing? He asked. They're growing stronger every day, Father, Rosanna replied, rising to greet him. But I fear we'll soon run out of nourishment for them. Tell me what you need, Lan offered. I'll provide it. Rosanna's mind raced. Would feeding her butterflies stronger blood, more potent toxins, make them even more powerful? Only 3 days remained until the monthly evaluation. The Pedalians had already reached the northern forest border. Dean would be returning soon as well. Everything was falling into place. Soon, life would return to normal, a life without Cassis. To accelerate the butterflies' growth, Rosanna increased their intake of poison and fed them even more blood. She could see the strain in his movements, the subtle signs of his weakening condition. As usual, Rosanna brought him his meal. Eat while it's hot, she said. You look pale, she added, surprising him with her concern. He stiffened. I came to tell you about the Pedalians, she stammered, her voice betraying her nervousness. Aren't you worried about them? Isidore will take care of it, he replied curtly. Do you think I'm incapable of handling it myself? He challenged, effortlessly freeing his hand from the restraints. He suddenly grasped her hand, startling her. What are you doing? She gasped, her face paling. A warmth spread through her hand, easing the stinging pain in her fingers. Who gave you permission to touch me? She demanded, trying to mask her surprise. You've done worse without my permission before, Cassis retorted, a smug look on his face. Rosanna felt a flicker of understanding. She was beginning to see his true nature. He's just being annoying, she told herself, looking away. He was only healing her to protect his escape plan, nothing more. Cassis, you seem to forget I'm also an Agrish, she said, her voice hardening. I know the monthly evaluation is almost upon us. The Pedalians have been found. The Agrish children were ecstatic. Fresh prey had arrived. Father, what happened? Rosanna asked, feigning ignorance. Go and make sure your pet is still where he belongs, Lant ordered. Are they Pedalian intruders? Most likely, Rosanna replied. I understand. It was time for the next stage of her plan. Lant looked at his daughter, seeing a reflection of himself in her decisive actions and shrewdness. Come along, he said, leading Cassis from the cell. They encountered Lance guards. Miss, just in case, perhaps you should return to your room with your toy. This intruder is Peter, Rosanna began, but was cut off by Cassis's hushed warning. I know, she whispered. I want to conduct an experiment. No one else knows. Can you keep a secret? I will be very grateful. Rosanna's beauty had its effect. The guards, flustered, stepped aside. Thank you, miss, they mumbled. Where does your father want the intruders taken after they're captured? She continued, pressing her advantage. The main hall, on the first floor, where the portraits hang. Good. Thank you for your service, Rosanna replied sweetly. They seemed rather affected by your presence, Cassis remarked, puzzled. Oh, it's you who's strange, Rosanna retorted. Their reaction was perfectly normal. Once you enter that passage, keep going and you'll find the place I mentioned. Don't let your guard down until you're completely free of this mansion. Be careful. He casually snuffed out the enchanted candles lining the hallway, disabling their magic. Seeing him injure himself so easily, Cassis started to heal him, but Rosanna stopped him. He sighed, a look of exasperation on his face as he effortlessly slipped free of his own restraints. Honestly, he hadn't taken more than a few steps when he turned abruptly, catching her hand. I don't think this is the end, he said, a playful glint in his eyes. So let's save the goodbyes for another time. He released her hand, a smile playing on his lips, and whispered in her ear, until then, stay safe. He's fallen for her, she realized, a strange mix of annoyance and something else fluttering in her chest. We'll meet again, Cassis assured her. Rosanna, the intruder has been caught. One of the guards approached. It's just a stray crow that escaped last time. Take it to the spell circle in the main hall. The alarm stopped. It seemed the creature had been the cause of the commotion. Lana Greesh felt a surge of irritation. Is that the intruder in there? Hardly worth mentioning, the guard replied. Then we should give them a proper welcome, Lance sneered. He grabbed Cassis and threw him down the stairs. Before everyone assembled, he unleashed his poisonous butterflies, letting them swarm and consume Cassis. Even Lance seemed momentarily taken aback by the gruesome display. Rosanna watched as the crow struggled free from the bag, feigning disappointment. Oh dear, it seems it wasn't one of the Pedalians after all. I was hoping to let those intruders witness their precious master reduced to nothing, she sighed dramatically. But my butterflies, they've been rather eager to devour my toy lately. So, I suppose it can't be helped. She turned to her father, a sweet smile on her face. Don't you agree? Lant roared with laughter, recognizing his own ruthlessness reflected in his daughter. Indeed, a fitting end. Perfect for that worm. Pedalian, he spat. Such ingenuity. You never disappoint me. Why didn't I think of this? I should have let Likiel. Pedalian's eyes widened in horror. He watched his own son die before him. A pity it wasn't one of Pedalian's dogs who came today. He was quite powerful, you know. Excellent nourishment for my butterflies. And for a worm like Pedalian. Rosanna played along, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Isn't this the highest honor, father? You're right. It's the best possible ending for him. It's getting late. You should rest, father. Finally, Rosanna could return to her room and, at least for a while, sleep soundly. They say your enemy knows you best. In this house, the one who understood Rosanna best was Dean. Back in her room, she dismissed her maids, ordering them not to disturb her, then collapsed, her body racked with exhaustion. Overusing the butterflies had taken its toll. She coughed, blood staining her lips. Cassis should be safely out of the Black Forest by now. He had to be. She had used every trick she had to ensure his escape. Not only had she revealed her killer butterflies to everyone, she had also used her summoning butterflies to swap Cassis out. It was the best solution, ensuring his escape and protecting her from repercussions. Everyone believed he had been devoured. No one knew he was gone from the mansion. She had also informed Pedalian's men to wait for him at the entrance to the Black Forest. He was a stubborn one. It was then that Rosanna noticed the burn on her hand was gone. He had healed her. She had simply trusted that Cassis, with his abilities, could navigate the Black Forest safely. Huh, I hear you fed Pedalian to your poisonous butterflies. Everyone's talking about it. How tiresome. Dean strolled in, uninvited, having clearly incapacitated her maids to gain entry. And what business is that of yours? She asked, forcing a calm demeanor as she wiped the blood from her lip. Where did you move him? Dean pressed, stepping closer, invading her personal space. Or shall I guess? There's only one place I wouldn't be able to reach right now, Dean mused, a cruel smile twisting his lips. The Black Forest on the northern border. You fooled everyone, except me. Such a shame, Rosanna. He lifted a hand, snatching one of the iridescent butterflies dancing in the air. Are these the butterflies that create the illusions? He asked, his voice laced with a knowing tone. It seems you've hatched more than one kind of butterfly. You're quite the delusional one, aren't you? Caught. Rosanna could only maintain her facade of indifference. Whether or not I'm delusional, you know best, she retorted coolly. So, are you going to tell everyone? What are you going to do? Perhaps send a search party north? Tearing Cassis to shreds and throwing him at your feet sounds appealing as well. He tightened his grip on the butterfly, hoping to provoke tears. He longed to see his sister cry. Dean was determined to drag Cassis back. He released the butterfly and turned to leave. He would spare the life of the little creature, the one who thrived on his sister's blood, for now. Don't go, Rosanna called out, stopping him. Despite the revulsion she felt for this man, the nausea that coiled in her stomach at his mere presence, she couldn't let him capture Cassis. So, she called out to him again. Wait. He actually turned back. He even approached her, allowing her to caress his face. This was one of the rare moments she could get close to her brother. Cassis didn't matter. Huh, you're such a fool. Do you think I don't know what you want? Whatever you offer me, I don't need it. His hand, stained with blood, smeared across her cheek. If you want to stay by my side, the only place for either of us is hell. Rosanna reached out, embracing him, preventing him from leaving. That day, he made a new pact of servitude. He knew that an endless hell awaited him. According to the original story, the heroine would be captured by the Agrishas, and, on the condition of not speaking to anyone else, she would learn of her brother's death from Jeremy. Upon hearing the news, she would break down, sobbing uncontrollably. I have a sister who likes to collect eyeballs, Jeremy would say. She mentioned liking your brother. She probably has his eyeballs. I can get them for you if you want. So please, don't be angry, whether it's you or your brothers. And all the Agrishas who harm my brother, they will all pay with blood. A life for a life. This was the ending for the Hellflower. 3 years after Cassis's escape, Rosanna patrolled the territory with her eldest brother. The eldest son of the Agrish family was also abnormal. He wasn't very bright, often manipulated by enemies. His hobbies included toying with slaves and seeing blood. You don't need to go there. I've taken care of it. Not even bone shards remain. 3 years later, she was both beautiful and powerful. Her simple-minded older brother wanted everything. A few words of praise, and he actually believed her lies. He was even leisurely feeding his pets. How fortunate. If you're just feeding them, you could have done it at the mansion. My poisonous butterflies are rather picky eaters, she said, her voice laced with a hint of amusement. They've grown tired of their usual food. So, it's a rare treat to be out here. Why are you so angry? Truly, just to vent your frustration. If you can't hunt monsters, why are you still so upset? Did father scold you again? Shut up, he snapped, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, unable to control his temper. This time, I heard the enemy stole the final victory. A year ago, he carried out a mission with me. He was just as despicable then. He hasn't changed a bit. He's good at empathizing with others. Father's getting old. His eyesight isn't what it used to be. I told father before that the opportunities he gave to Brother Pertain and Dean were unfair. Father was even angry with me, but he doesn't have the qualifications to be the heir. Who would want to be a lapdog at a tyrant's feet? Who knows when they'll be kicked to death? I wish there was someone who could unite us all. Pertain's side, someone to take father's place. If it were you, Brother Pertain, I think you would do wonderfully. Rosanna's words were a balm to his wounded pride. Feeling validated, his ego swelled. You're right. If father didn't always favor Dean, if he treated us equally, I wouldn't be in this position. But even more than that, you haven't been given a fair chance either. It's been a year since you came of age, and you haven't had a chance to show your true capabilities. He adopted a wounded expression. It can't be helped. Father likes to keep me as an ornament. His words sparked a flicker of understanding in Pertain's mind. The master of those terrifying poisonous butterflies, reduced to nothing more than a decorative piece? Truly, all style and no substance. So, the rumors of her brutally murdering that noble son 3 years ago were just rumors. In his mind, Rosanna was no longer a threat. It's such a shame you can't attend the 5 families reconciliation meeting, brother. I was hoping to attend with you this year. Hearing him call her sister so intimately, his thoughts began to drift towards forbidden territory. After all, the Agrishas can marry within the family. Trust me, I'll never let Dean become the heir. He was filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Thank you. You're the only one I can truly trust and rely on, Brother Pertain. Fighting back her nausea, Rosanna watched him leave. She had simply intended to use him, but he dared to entertain such thoughts about her. Sister, can I gouge out that idiot's eyes? Jeremy, now older and even more handsome, asked with a chillingly pleasant smile. Later, I want him to see himself fall from grace with his own eyes. That fool is so clueless. He doesn't even know how many people are around him, yet he acts so high and mighty. Jeremy's face twisted with disgust at the mention of Pertain. Since Pertain is back, that means Dean is back too. Let's go back. Upon returning to the mansion, Jeremy announced his intention to see their father. Rosanna told him to go ahead. Obedient as ever, he agreed, but not without adding, "Sister, you have to see me first tomorrow." Her younger brother had become even more attached to her after their coming-of-age ceremony. 3 years ago, during the monthly evaluation, he had been consumed by guilt after experiencing a vision where he killed his beloved sister with his own hands. "Can I still stay by your side, sister?" her sweet, innocent brother had asked. "Didn't I tell you to do it? You just did what I wanted like always. And it was only an illusion. See, I'm still standing right here." She stroked his head, offering gentle comfort. "If you hadn't done it, you'd be dead. And that would have made me very sad. I truly think you did well." Rosanna was particularly busy today. Having just returned from outside, she now had to see her father. Someone had also come looking for her from her mother's side. "Isn't mother with the third wife right now? Madam is alone right now. What should we do? I have to go see father now." "See, could you go after that?" the young maid stammered, afraid of being punished if she couldn't bring them both together. Wanting to find her mother some company, Rosanna instructed the maid to fetch the third wife. "Have her go keep mother company. I heard they're having a tea party, the first in a while." "Is that so? It's been a long time since mother attended one. Perhaps she's just bored being alone." "That's not it, Mississippi madam." Rosanna ignored the maid's pleas. She didn't have time to play the doting daughter right now. She continued to instruct her maid. The third wife shouldn't refuse a request to visit mother. If she's still hesitant because of the last tea party, tell her Dean is back. The third wife will be more concerned about mother's safety than Dean, so she definitely won't leave mother alone now. "Bess, I don't dislike children like you. However, you need to think carefully about what's best for your master. If you bother me with these things again, I will hold you accountable for not taking proper care of my mother." Bess apologized profusely, accepting her fate. She would have to return and comfort her mistress alone. The young mistress wouldn't be going. She had originally been the third wife's maid. After all, it was the young mistress's mother who had pleaded for Bess's life after a mishap at a tea party nearly cost her dearly. To repay this kindness, Bess dedicated herself to caring for Rosanna's mother. Arriving at her father's door, Rosanna sensed the heavy atmosphere within, but maintained a decorous smile. "Father, you called for me?" "Yes." "Are the preparations for the social gathering proceeding smoothly?" "Yes, everything is going according to plan." Every year, Lant used the social gathering as an opportunity to observe the other families. He had instructions for his daughter, keeping her occupied until late into the evening. Only then was Rosanna able to excuse herself. Meanwhile, Dean, having just returned, was waiting for her. He had been waiting since dusk. "Did you have that much to discuss with father?" Dean asked, a hint of accusation in his voice. "Why wouldn't I? Or perhaps, did you think I prolonged the meeting because I knew you were waiting for me?" "It's been a while, Dean." The aura surrounding her brother had grown colder, more menacing. He brushed her bangs aside, his hand trailing down to her chin. "I heard you handle the task I gave you quite well." Pertain is furious. "Truly, you're just like me, a loyal dog. But even loyal dogs can be foolish sometimes. I told you, there's no need to report to me in person like this. Didn't I say it bothers me to see your face?" Rosanna caught his restless hand. "You're as contradictory as ever. It's rather amusing to see you like this after so long." Their actions were intimate, yet their words were barbed. "You always manage to get under my skin. Angering me won't benefit you. Unlike our eldest brother, people actually have some genuine affection for him. But no matter how much he desires it, I won't let him have what he wants. What you desire is even more difficult to obtain than what he seeks. So entertain me. Don't give up. Try your best. Perhaps one day, if I'm in a good mood, I might just give you my heart." Lant, accompanied by his most exceptional children, journeyed to the World Tree for the social gathering. The World Tree stood in a neutral territory at the center of the continent. Every year at the beginning of the year, the 5 great families, Crimson, Azure, Yellow, White, and Black, held a gathering. This event served to promote harmony among the families. Jeremy, attending for the first time, held a certain anticipation for the gathering. He wondered how many fools he would encounter at the World Tree. Only 3 of them were in the carriage. Dean, detained by unforeseen circumstances, would arrive later. Rosanna, however, hoped he wouldn't come at all. That way, she wouldn't have to face him. The carriage jolted, signaling their arrival in the neutral territory. A spell circle was etched into the ground. 500 years ago, the White family, exploiting their ability to communicate with magical beasts, had reduced the world tree to scorched earth. Since then, a massive spell circle had been inscribed to the world tree. Summoning magical beasts was forbidden within its boundaries. However, the spell had a loophole. Beasts summoned outside could be brought in. Though their powers would be sealed, they could still be used as messengers. Rosanna, you understand your task, don't you? Lant brought her here every year for a specific purpose, to use her poisonous butterflies to spy on the other families. Father, the long carriage ride has left me rather fatigued. May I retire to my quarters first? Once permission was granted, she could begin her work. For the next 4 days, Rosanna's task was simple: dispatch her butterflies to monitor the members of the other families. This surveillance included her dear father. Sister, let's go together, Jeremy said, preferring to stay by her side. Their father lingered behind, conspiring with members of the Yellow family. According to the novel, Lant was interested in the Yellow family's unique magic, specifically their puppetry, a magic that allowed them to create remarkably lifelike puppets. He dreamed of building a puppet army, soldiers who wouldn't fear death or feel pain. In the original story, the head of the Yellow family was also one of the protagonists. He accepted Lant's patronage while simultaneously aiding the blackened heroine in destroying the Agrish family. He was a deeply misanthropic individual, driven by the desire to establish his own kingdom. It doesn't seem like something Father would be interested in, Rosanna mused, gazing down at the gathering below. There was no one who matched the description of the novel's male protagonist. It appears the head of the Yellow family won't be attending this year, either. Sister, are you really not going to the banquet? Jeremy asked. I'll only attend on the last day. Jeremy, why don't you go and enjoy yourself with the others? There's nothing fun about it, Jeremy grumbled. If Sister isn't going, I don't want to go either. I'd rather watch you tear up pieces of paper than socialize with those people. Just then, voices drifted in from the hallway outside. The whispers were eager, curious about Rosanna's famed beauty. Noticing her brother's diverted attention, Rosanna seized the opportunity. I'm hungry, she said, giving him an excuse to leave. Go and have someone bring up some food. All right, I'll take care of it, Jeremy agreed, already halfway out the door. He returned moments later, his spirits high, having completely forgotten about the dinner arrangements. Sorry, sister, Rosanna sighed, pulling the cord to summon a servant herself. She hadn't truly expected him to handle it. She turned a blind eye to his forgetfulness. She, too, found it irritating that people lingered outside just to catch a glimpse of her. Which young lady locks herself in her room for 4 days straight? A maid commented, trying to coax Rosanna out. You should go out for a stroll. After all, there are so many people waiting outside every day, hoping to see your face. Rosanna sipped her tea on the balcony, feigning ignorance of her own captivating beauty. Is that so? I don't recall that being the case. I went out last year, and no one approached me. That's because you're too dazzling, Mississippi. Downstairs, a crowd had indeed gathered. Just a glimpse of her would be enough, someone whispered. Oh heavens, she looked at me. In reality, Rosanna's gaze was fixed beyond them. She was looking at the novel's other male protagonist, the heir to the White family. He had been the only heir of the 5 great families present at last year's gathering. The White family had a keen interest in magical beasts. During the annual gathering, he always visited the habitats of rare creatures. The heir to the Crimson family, with his violet eyes and crimson hair, was just as described in the novel, cripplingly gynophobic. While others blushed and stammered at Rosanna's beauty, he simply glared at her before stalking off. He hadn't done anything to her, yet he wore such a hostile expression. How peculiar, she thought. Who do you think you are, looking at me like that? Sister. Jeremy, never one to tolerate disrespect towards his sister, bristled instantly. Jeremy won't stand for anyone being rude to Sister. So you're an Agrish as well? The Crimson heir sneered. How dare you speak to me that way? Control your own gaze before you criticize mine. Rosanna watched her increasingly volatile younger brother about to ignite another conflict. She hadn't intended to interfere with the novel's plot, but surely the protagonist couldn't be so easily provoked. Shall I cut out your tongue so you can finally be silent? All right, this protagonist was clearly enraged. Rosanna stepped in, putting a hand on Jeremy's arm. Jeremy, that's enough. Come here. My brother was simply worried about me, she explained to the Crimson Heir. Please forgive his rudeness. Jeremy stuck his tongue out at the other boy, a look of utter disdain on his face, but obeyed his sister nonetheless. To think a clingy brat like that is your brother must be tiresome, the Crimson Heir remarked. Faced with such unrelenting hostility, Rosanna couldn't resist a retort. He's only rude to those who are rude to me, like yourself. Besides, she added, a playful smile gracing her lips, he's quite a sweet child. She offered a small, polite bow. I apologize for my own impoliteness as well. Before turning to leave, she added a final pointed remark. Please refrain from any retaliatory actions. Since this banquet is meant to foster unity and camaraderie, I do hope we can enjoy the remaining time together pleasantly. Miss, her maid said, seeing Rosanna still in her room, the heads of the yellow and azure families have arrived. I know. Prepare me to see father. Finally, the female protagonist was about to make her appearance. On the last day of the social gathering, it was announced that the head of the Azure family would be attending with his daughter. Lanagrish, in turn, brought his own daughter out, deliberately seeking an encounter with the Azure family. He greeted them with a cordial smile. It's been a while. Lant greeted the head of the Azure family. You still have a face that makes me want to punch it. The feeling's mutual, the Azure head retorted. You should take a look in the mirror sometime. So, you finally decided to bring your daughter out, the Azure head continued, his tone laced with sarcasm. After keeping her locked away for so long, what made you change your mind? Lant made a crude joke about the Azure head's daughter, his primary intention being to provoke him. The subject of the Azure head's son remained untouched. As far as Lant was concerned, the boy was long gone, nothing but dust and bone. My son is preoccupied with important matters, the Azure head replied stiffly, the excuse barely concealing his grief. It's been 3 years since I've seen your handsome son. What could possibly be so important that he hasn't been seen for years? If looks could kill, Lant would have been riddled with holes from the Azure head's glare. In that case, the Azure head said, his voice tight, we shall eagerly await his return. It will be a pleasure to see your precious son at this gathering. Lant brushed past him, Rosanna at his side. In the Azure head's eyes, Lant was a madman, obsessed with his dead son. He's already dead, the Azure head muttered to himself. I don't know what he thinks he can do. How dare he? But it's rather amusing, isn't it? A dark smile flickered across his face. I wonder what father's expression will be when he finds out Cassis is still alive. At the ball, many young men were captivated by the Azure family princess's beauty. But Jeremy, noticing her resemblance to Cassis, felt only disgust. That night, Rosanna read the intelligence gathered by her butterflies, noting her brother's harsh assessment of the Azure princess. She felt confident that while Jeremy's curiosity about the princess had brought him to the gathering, he wouldn't do anything rash, like kidnapping her out of infatuation. Rosanna lay wearily in bed, watching as Cassis's sister became the star of the evening's festivities. She found herself hoping for the girl's safety. Rosanna always had trouble sleeping in unfamiliar places. She slipped out under the cover of night for a walk, noticing the poisonous plant she'd encountered last year was still thriving. Its presence brought her a strange sense of comfort, perhaps because in this unfamiliar place it was something familiar. Rosanna crouched beside the poisonous plant, hugging herself against the chill. It's cold tonight, she murmured. Surely reality will deviate from the novel's ending now, she thought. Just then, a figure cloaked in black robes entered her line of sight. An enemy? She wondered, her hand instinctively reaching for a hidden dagger. Rosanna had been enjoying a rare moment of peace, a surprisingly pleasant night, only to be interrupted by this black-clothed man. Could it be Dean already? She thought, irritated. I gave him a difficult task to keep him occupied. Annoyed at the prospect of seeing him, she hid behind a tree, hoping to remain unnoticed. The footsteps drew closer. Despite suppressing her presence, the sharp-eyed figure spotted her. Didn't I tell you I didn't want to see you? She hissed, stepping out of her hiding place. Are you deaf? This was a rare, decent night. Don't say anything. Just leave, Dean. She held up a hand. Don't come any closer. The figure seemed to heed her words. Instead of approaching, he removed his cloak. He offered it to her and turned to leave, a silent gesture to protect her from the night's chill. Rosanna caught the scent of the cloak, realizing it wasn't Dean. The final day of the banquet had begun. Dean still hadn't arrived, and Lant was growing increasingly irritated by his son's tardiness. Jeremy, equally displeased by his brother's absence, answered his father's questions with a flippant air. It's better if that guy doesn't come, Jeremy muttered. Who knows what kind of trouble he'd cause while father's away. Rosanna, in stark contrast to her earlier demeanor, smoothly intervened, defending her absent brother. Don't worry, father, she said, her voice gentle. It's Dean, after all. He'll be here before the banquet ends. Reassured by his daughter's words, Lance's annoyance subsided. Fine, he conceded. Let's go see which idiots have graced us with their presence. As they entered, they were met with a wave of intense stares, all focused on Rosanna. Among them was the Crimson family head's stern glare. From outside, another arrival announced themselves, their voice preceding their entrance. Next, two figures entered, practically glued to each other. The head of the White family, clinging to his attendant, stumbled into the hall. He looked half asleep, just as the novel described, where he saw Rosanna smiling at him. He promptly fell off his attendant, a thin trickle of blood tracing a winding path down his nose. His attendant, witnessing the spectacle, quickly dragged him away. Jeremy watched the pair retreat, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Thoughtfully, he went to find some refreshments for his sister. Amidst the noise and bustle of the banquet, Jeremy felt a growing sense of anticipation, a restless energy thrumming beneath his skin. He was waiting for something to happen. The doors opened, and three members of the Azure family stepped into the hall, all eyes upon them. Among them was Cassis, who had arrived the previous night. The moment their eyes met, Jeremy felt time, which had seemed frozen, begin to flow again. Since the night Cassis had left, his world had felt strangely still. Lant, seeing Cassis, crushed the wine glass in his hand. That idiot, how? Everyone was staring, questioning, trying to confirm whether what they were seeing was real. Jeremy ignored his father's outburst. He knew Lant would want to leave now. He certainly wouldn't be in the mood to stay. What is the meaning of this? Rosanna, composed, delivered her prepared explanation. Father, please calm down. He did die by my hand. You saw yourself. Then who is that? Lant flung his daughter's hand away, suspicion clouding his eyes. Perhaps it was a substitute? He glanced at the head of the Yellow family, subtly implying that the aura surrounding Cassis was unmistakably that of a Pedalian. Even if we claimed he had a twin, people would believe it, Rosanna continued smoothly. Perhaps the truth is simple. After all, there are those in this world who can create puppets indistinguishable from living beings. As I told you before, not long ago, the Azure and White families seem to be in contact. Perhaps they've been conspiring. If the Azure family was facing a crisis due to the loss of their heir, they could have been working in secret for the past 3 years, creating a puppet of Cassis. It all makes sense. Lant, considering his daughter's reasoning, found it plausible. He decided to confront the White family head. Very well. Be careful, father. Rosanna, inwardly relieved by her father's trust, knew his efforts would be futile. Suddenly, her hand was seized and she was slammed against the wall. What a dramatic way to greet someone, Dean. He had rushed over as soon as he finished his task. He hadn't even had time to wash the blood from his hands before hearing that his rival had appeared. Seeing his face again, are you happy? You already know the answer. Why ask? Provoking Dean's jealousy was her specialty. The sight of him gritting his teeth was a rare one. Sometimes, I really do want to kill you. He tightened his grip. Excuse me. A voice interrupted. I didn't realize the Agrisha's preferred method of greeting was threatening someone. Cassis, who had followed Rosanna, witnessed the entire scene. Now, wasn't the time to watch two men bicker over her. Looking directly into Dean's eyes, Rosanna activated her butterfly's ability. He released her and stepped back. Thank you for your assistance. My name is Rosanna Agrish. May I ask your name? It was the first time she had formally introduced herself to him. It was as if they were meeting anew. This formal introduction was 3 years overdue. They met again. He is the esteemed Azure Go, young master, Cassis. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. It's an honor to meet you, and thank you for your help. If you'll permit me, please allow me to offer you a proper greeting. He extended his hand gracefully. For a moment, they stood there, a picture of tranquility, as if the animosity between their families had never existed. I've often heard of the esteemed Azure young master. I apologize for letting you witness such an unseemly squabble between my brother and me. Just a sibling squabble. Cassis mused. Truly, the Agrish family has peculiar ways. Yes, so please don't mind it, Rosanna replied, averting her gaze. It's late. I should return. You should go back to the banquet hall as well. Rosanna bid him farewell and turned to leave. He draped his cloak over her shoulders once more. The night is cold, just like last night. You needn't return this. Rosanna watched him return to the hall, clutching the cloak tightly. The wind had picked up. Miss Agricia, our master, he wanted me to give you this. The white family attendant, his face flushed crimson, presented her with a bouquet of roses. He avoided her gaze, clearly flustered. Please convey my thanks, Rosanna said, taking the flowers and swiftly departing. She paid no mind to the attendant's stammered wait from behind. There were more pressing matters at hand. She discarded the roses. Having received a message from her poisonous butterfly, it was time to see her father. Father, I believe we should return to the estate now. Jeremy had just seen Dean and learned some disturbing news. I hear that our eldest brother has staged a revolt while you were away. Lance's veins bulged on his forehead. Before he'd even had a chance to speak with the head of the Yellow family, his eldest son was causing trouble. We return immediately. That wretched boy won't inherit a single stone. Cassis, who had been keeping an eye on the Agricias, saw them leaving. His moment to act had arrived. Brother, please be careful. Rosanna, fearing another disappearance like the last time, was consumed with worry. Don't worry. Return with father. Wait for me. Once this is over, I'll return at once. Both Cassis and Rosanna set off, heading towards the Agricia estate. Lan had brought 3 of his children to the gathering, but left the eldest behind. And now, the eldest had attempted to usurp control. Lant and his children rushed back. His first order upon arrival was to have his eldest son dragged to the judgment chamber. It happened so quickly that no one had time to understand what was happening. No one knew what crime he had committed to warrant being taken to the judgment chamber. This was where the Agricias dealt with transgressors. It was here that Dean had dealt with Gargia. Every member of the Agricia family feared this place. Are you ready? Rosanna exchanged a look with her maid. Upon receiving confirmation, she released her poisonous butterfly. Her next move was set in motion. Jeremy, I leave the matters outside to you. Of course, sister. He had grown into her capable right hand. Father, this is all a misunderstanding, the eldest brother tried to plead. But Lance struck him with his cane, the force so great that the cane snapped. You thought I knew nothing? You dared to stab me in the back. His plan had been so perfect. How had his father discovered it? The eldest brother couldn't fathom who had betrayed him. His gaze fell upon Dean, standing behind his father. He decided to drag his brother down with him. If it weren't for Dean, his plan wouldn't have failed. He struggled to sit up. Father, this is all Dean's doing. I'm innocent. Don't give me that nonsense. From the moment you started gathering forces behind my back, I had Dean watching you. Did you really think I was oblivious? So, his father had suspected him from the very beginning of his plan. The eldest brother's mind went blank. Lant grabbed him by the collar and delivered another stinging slap. This was his punishment for underestimating him. Someone bring me my sword. He cut the ropes binding his eldest son, then forced him to the ground, demanding to know the location of the soldiers. But the eldest truly didn't know anything about the soldiers. I taught you never to tell the truth so readily. I didn't mean for you to use that trick against me. He raised his sword. As long as his son refused to speak the truth, the blade would fall. Father, there's no need to waste your time on him. Rosanna's voice stopped her father. She knew it was pointless to interrogate him further. Have you found those soldiers? Lance's face, grim only a moment before, lit up with pride. As expected of my daughter. Such efficiency. Ignoring her father's praise, Rosanna turned and ascended to his throne. What are you doing? The smile that had briefly graced Lance's face vanished, replaced by a thunderous scowl. I've wanted to sit here for a long time. Today, I finally get my wish. From this perspective, Father, you truly look insignificant. Faced with his daughter's open defiance, Lant raised his sword, intending to teach her a lesson. But a swarm of poisonous butterflies erupted around him, forming a buzzing, venomous shield. Did you never suspect me? All of this. I did it for you. The situation, already tense, shifted into something far more dangerous. Rosanna, the seemingly innocent daughter, had orchestrated everything. To survive in this family, she continued, her voice laced with a chilling calm, I had to take control. Father, this entire charade, it was a trap laid just for you. Didn't you notice a thing? Rosanna, you dare. Lant lunged, sword flashing, but the runic array beneath his feet activated. Rosanna had prepared it beforehand. A blood magic array, waiting for the final ingredient, her eldest brother's blood. Why are you so careless? she murmured, a flick of her wrist the only movement needed. Lant crumpled to the floor, powerless. Her eldest brother, still bound, stared in horrified fascination at his sister's ruthlessness. "You taught me, father," Rosanna purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "There is no such thing as affection or loyalty between a father and his children. But I played the obedient daughter so well, didn't I?" "Dean!" Lant roared, calling for his other son, the one he thought he could still rely on. "Help me, subdue this wretched girl." But Rosanna simply beckoned, and Dean, without a glance at his father, obediently walked over and took her hand, betrayed by 3 of his children in quick succession. Lance's fury threatened to consume him. "Sister, I apologize for the wait." Jeremy entered, taking in the scene with a flicker of surprise. Lant, desperate, saw a last glimmer of hope. But Jeremy's gaze went past him, landing on Rosanna. Lant reached out, pleading for his youngest son's help. "Hey!" Dean released Rosanna's hand. "Sister's hands are mine." Jeremy stepped on his father's outstretched hand, rushing to Rosanna's side, swatting Dean's hand away. He then nestled his head against her leg, a picture of childish devotion. "What a pity, father. Not a single soul in the Agrish family stands with you. But don't worry, I still have use for you alive." Lant glared at his children, his teeth grinding in impotent rage. Cassis and his companions arrived at the edge of the Agrish estate, watching the unfolding chaos. He knew Rosanna had made her move. "Let's wait a little longer. This unfortunate connection will soon be severed." Driven to desperation by their father's brutality, his children had turned against him. Meanwhile, their mother, hearing from a maid about Dean's supposed rebellion, refused to believe it. She suspected her daughter was the true mastermind, despite her heart pounding with fear. She quickly put on her shoes, determined to see her daughter. "Madam, it's too dangerous outside. Please wait until the situation is under control." Seeing her mistress's resolve, the maid grabbed a broom, positioning herself protectively. Outside, chaos reigned. Rosanna leaned against the window, a serene observer. She watched the frantic activity below, unconcerned about the spreading conflict. He, too, was a conspirator in the betrayal of their father. He had always found Rosanna intriguing. He remembered her words from childhood. "One day, I'll show you something interesting in this place." In exchange, he had drawn a runic array for her. This was the girl, a mere 12 years old, who had usurped his place at the grand dinner table. Their pact, her design for the runic array, was like assembling the intricate parts of clock. Each gear had to fit perfectly. These fragile components, layered upon each other, became incredibly robust. Who could have imagined that all of this was orchestrated by her hand? Even I am but a pawn in her game. I hope father won't blame me, just as you taught us from a young age. We all rely on our own skills to survive. The useless are disposed of. It seems tonight, Agrish is hosting a grand party. Rosanna remained in the punishment chamber with her father. "Father, see? I told you. This is what you should look like." "Oh dear, are you unable to speak? Do you know what I think every time I see your disgusting face? I wonder what method I should use to dispose of you, to make you wish you were dead. Fortunately, you're an Agrish. Even bitten by my poisonous butterflies, you won't die easily. I hope you can endure it a little longer, so that I can properly repay you for raising me." Jeremy is outside, busy taking his revenge as well. The siblings looked at the corpses lying on the ground, some in disbelief that he had done it. "I've always wanted to try it. What it feels like to kill without restraint. But these people aren't innocent. They weren't exactly kind to me when I was young. Now I kind of regret letting them die so quickly." "Are you crazy? Attacking the instructor? That's a death sentence." He looked indifferent. "That person has already been locked up in the punishment chamber. I'm not afraid of him. By the way, I'll let you know, we can also go to the punishment chamber. I plan to visit later and see what father looks like after being tortured. I hope there's still something left of him for me to work with. Don't you think we've lived miserably before? Bullied by instructors and enforcers every day. Our lives and deaths were in their hands. Now that we have a chance for revenge, of course we can't miss it. Anyone want to join me in dealing with the remaining instructors and enforcers?" Jeremy, after wasting so much breath with them, finally revealed his purpose. The others became tense after hearing this, feeling that their chance to rise had come. Rebellion broke out in the Agrish family, causing chaos inside and out. The aunts and concubines also panicked. "What should we do? Should we surrender to Dean? But with his temperament, we're afraid we'll receive the same treatment as Agrish. It's better to hide with the children." Some regretted not having a better relationship with Dean's mother. "Daughter, where are you going? You have to stay and protect us." Who can protect anyone now? Everyone for themselves. You should also inform the other ants. Everyone escape as best they can. Jeremy had already informed everyone to gather. He had to hurry over. Even if he was stupid, he could guess that this rebellion wasn't Dean's doing. Jeremy wouldn't listen to Dean. It must be Sister Rosanna who occupied Agrish. The siblings outside had gone on a killing spree, even comparing their kill counts. Jeremy definitely had the highest kill count. You're so late. I've already finished everything. I'm just here to deliver a message from Rosanna. She wants you to put this in Aunt Maria's room. And after you're done, call all the servants to... Forget it. He picked up the sachet. He sleeps like a log. What does he need this kind of thing? Rosanna sat in the head's office, tasting the wine her father usually drank. I didn't give you permission to come in. Dean wasn't obedient at this point. Fine, whatever. I'm in a good mood today. She gently swirled the wine glass. Want a glass too? No, he replied coldly, his eyes glancing at her clothes. Are you looking at this? I didn't expect you to recognize it. Cassis gave it to me. I like it, so I'm wearing it. Does it upset you that I'm doing this? He deliberately pulled his clothes tighter, a provocation. As expected, Dean's face darkened. Rosanna cupped his face. Every time you make this expression, I find it fascinating. You always seem angry when you see me. He didn't back down. I don't regret killing Arthur. Even if I could go back, I wouldn't hesitate. I would even snap his neck in front of you. If Cassis had really died in front of you, I wonder what you would have become. He gripped her wrist. Rosanna's good mood was successfully ruined. The two siblings understood each other better than anyone else in the world, yet they interacted like sworn enemies. If Cassis had truly died before your eyes, what would you have become? Dean had always been curious, slightly regretting acting so early. But there were no second chances in this world. He released his sister's hand and clenched his fist. His next goal was to kill their mother, to see his crying face once more. Rosanna had long known his thoughts. That's why she always kept Dean's mother with her own. Dean stared intently at his sister. You say you know what I want. How laughable. You know something I don't even know myself. I always thought everything I did was to survive. But now, survival doesn't seem to be my ultimate goal. He stood up, his back to Dean, avoiding his burning gaze. Do you know what I want? Dean answered truthfully, I do. If I can give you what you want, can you give me what I desire? All right, we should go take care of the aftermath. He evaded the question. Stepping out, he encountered a lone servant. Where are you going? The gathering place for the useless isn't here. Miss, I have a stomachache. I want to rest for a bit. The servant stammered nervously, hastily hiding the letter in his hand behind his back. But Dean had already seen through him. Then rest for a bit. He wasn't the type to be inconsiderate of his subordinates. You don't have to worry about anything. When you wake up from the poison, everything will be over. The servant convulsed and collapsed, poisoned. The intercepted letter was a plea for help from his father to the head of the Yellow House. He didn't know what kind of debt his father owed the Yellow House head to actually request military support. Although it seemed troublesome, it didn't matter. None of it was important anymore. He casually lit the letter on fire. Jeremy, having completed his sister's instructions, came to report. Seeing how lightly she was dressed, he draped his own cloak over her. You did well. Can you bring this person in front of the other servants for me? Though curious about his sister's request, he never questioned her, always complying. He hoisted the servant over his shoulder and headed towards the gathering point. The children of the Agrish family had all rebelled. Lant and his eldest son ended up imprisoned. The eldest brother, locked in a cell, was left unattended. He found it strange that there were no guards and no groans. Had his father already been tortured to death? He even smugly mocked their stupidity for giving him a chance to escape. Where's Lant? The enemy had come looking for his father, but only found the eldest brother. I can't believe you're calling him by his name now. It seems he's either dead or escaped. If you use me just to replace father, there's no need to try to kill me, right? Seeing Dean, he thought he had a chance to persuade him to let him go. The current situation was better than being in his father's hands. I don't intend to be the head. I was just misled by Rosanna. I think you'd be a better leader. In his eyes, Dean only pretended to be noble, but in reality, he coveted the position of head just like him. If you let me go, I'll personally deliver father's head to you. If you don't want to see me, I can leave. I can live quietly and never bother you. Dean scoffed. Bother me? You seem to have the wrong idea. Do you think you're even qualified to be a stumbling block for me? In Dean's eyes, his older brother held no value. His brother cursed him inwardly, but his words remained pleading. then there's even less reason for you to try and kill me. Since I'm no threat, there's no need to keep me locked up here. Seeing Dean's unwavering stare, he grew more frantic. Does this really require so much thought? Wouldn't it be simpler to just do as I say? I'm considering whether or not to open this door and kill you. Come to think of it, I've always found you irritating. He tore the specially made iron door open with his bare hands. Killing him would be as easy as crushing an ant. I really want to gouge out those eyes of yours. The reason for his irritation was likely those eyes, always fixed on Rosanna with ill intentions. I'm your family. You can't kill me. Panic, genuine and raw, seized him, his forehead slick with sweat. But the blaring of alarms outside granted him a reprieve. The rebellion within the Agrish estate was still ongoing when invaders struck from outside. The combat troops had been reassigned by the eldest brother, who had been the first to rebel. Cassis launched his attack, specifically instructing his men that this was not a massacre. Their primary objective was to capture Agrish. Those who were unarmed and fleeing were to be spared. The Agrish estate was in utter chaos. The Grand Hall was ablaze, their father overthrown, and the monster pens had been opened. Pedrian was under attack by the creatures. All this turmoil unfolded according to Rosanna's plan. Cassis rescued an Agrish guard from the jaws of a monster. Hey, where's Agrish? Rosanna had orchestrated a rebellion, toppling her father's reign. She had specifically instructed Jeremy to tell the servants to gather in the hall and stay out of the conflict. The servants, however, were clamoring amongst themselves. Quiet, she snapped. Rosanna couldn't be bothered to explain. If you want to live, stay put. Jeremy, following his sister's orders, was carrying the messenger servant when he heard another commotion outside. What's going on? Who's foolish enough to attack now? He initially intended to ignore it, but seeing the place where his sister had just been standing now engulfed in flames, he dropped the servant and sprang into action. Although he knew his sister was powerful, he couldn't shake a feeling of unease. He drew his blade and charged, cutting down any invaders that stood in his path with swift, decisive movements. There's some over here too, he muttered, though I'd like to stay and play. I have more pressing matters to attend to. What's this? A crimson blizzard began to fall from the sky. Every weapon vanished in a thin air. The invaders plummeted into black holes that suddenly appeared in the ground. Jeremy recognized his sister's butterflies. They had created an illusionary realm. Lan escaped from his prison, snatching a robe and weapon from an enforcer. Only Greta can set up runic arrays. This means he's betrayed me too. These ungrateful wretches. I won't spare a single one of them. He just needed to reach the hidden passage and wait for reinforcements to arrive. Then he would retaliate. He ran straight into Dean, who had come looking for him. If you're here to apologize, Lance sneered, I might just forgive you. He threw off the robe, abandoning all pretense. Dean didn't waste his breath, drawing his sword and charging. I knew you were mad, Lant roared, but I never thought you'd betray me for a dead girl. You ungrateful wretch. The first blow missed. Dean ripped off his gloves and spun, preparing for another attack. Lant trapped Dean's arm with his leg. Their swords clashed and separated. You owe your very existence in this world to me. I trusted you so completely. Dean, on the defensive, clutched a wound on his face and ignored him. The way you're crossing blades with our father and seeming to enjoy it, Lan observed, it's just like me. Just like Lan had usurped his own father, the Agrish children were now in open rebellion. Dean, his obsession with Rosanna, his undoing, was the first target. He hadn't even fully escaped before plotting his revenge, but a sword pierced him from behind. Turning, Dean recognized the one who had dealt the blow. He'd seen him before at a gathering. It was Cassis of the Bluebell family. He remembered a frail, almost pathetic figure, someone he could have knocked down with a single punch. Now, even if he could tear him to shreds, he was powerless. It wasn't Agrish. I stabbed the wrong person. He already ran. Someone else is looking for me too. You should be able to find him by following his trail. I hear everyone from the Bluebell family acts with honor. Since I realized my mistake, I won't pursue him. But, Cassis added with a cruel smirk, your enemy, Rosanna, should be here as well. You said earlier you wanted to kill Rosanna, right? Dean nodded vigorously, like a small, eager child. A shared enemy meant a greater chance of survival. In that case, I'd better strike first. Blood sprayed. The simple-minded Dean wouldn't have to think anymore. Elsewhere, Rosanna's maid was escorting her mistress, Rosanna's mother, to safety. She had been worried about her young mistress being unprotected, but she'd heard Jeremy had already gone ahead of them. Though still concerned for Rosanna's safety, she pressed on. The wall beside them exploded. The maid shielded the woman behind her. Dean stood before them. As expected, he was trying to cause Rosanna pain amidst the chaos. He'd been pursuing his father, but had stumbled upon Rosanna's mother. Evenly matched, they fought until both lay on the ground, unable to move. Now help me up. Don't just stand there. Rosanna's mother had always been gentle and obedient. Despite his current state, Lant believed he still had a chance. He could make his wife atone for their daughter's sins. The maid stood protectively in front of her mistress, urging her to flee. Why should I? The maid spoke first, her hands nervously twisting her apron. Why should I help the man who killed my son and brought misfortune to my daughter? Lant was stunned by Sierra's defiance. She had always been so subservient, but now she stood firm. Damn you, woman. You think I'll let you go? I'll tear off your limbs and your daughter's too. Though immobilized, he continued to curse. You're still alive, Lana Greesh? Cassis's voice dripped with mockery as his gaze met Dean's. I heard you caught up with Lant in the dungeons. I thought I'd give you a chance. Wasn't that enough? Then it's my turn. Lant clutched his throat, unable to move, only the fire in his eyes flickering. It really was you, that Rosanna brat. He didn't know how she'd done it, but she had tricked him again. Powerless to escape, he could only hurl insults, blaming his wife for her disobedience. Cassis's blade pierced Lance's flesh again and again, a slow, agonizing torture. He let him struggle, even try to tear open his own wounds to end it. Didn't I tell you not to do anything foolish? I can heal you countless times. Cassis laughed coldly, mending the wounds. For the first time in his life, Lance felt like a trapped rat. His vengeance sated, Cassis finally ended Lance's life. It was time to retreat. He ordered his men to withdraw, but the sight of red butterflies in the distance made him pause. He had someone he wanted to see before the night was over. Rosanna watched as the flames consumed the Agrish estate. Perhaps due to the long-term effects of the drugs, her vision was blurred. She only heard the invaders retreating, the surrounding chaos slowly subsiding. The butterflies she had sent throughout the estate returned, fluttering around her like playful sprites, their task of sowing illusion and discord complete. Her goal had been the downfall of the Agrish family, not the people within it. That was why she had effectively disbanded the Agrish army and ensured the servants were sheltered in the annex. She felt obligated to witness this scene to its very end. Even as her power waned, blood trickling from her lips, she refused to close her eyes. It was finally over. She was utterly exhausted. With every step, the plants beneath his feet withered from the poisonous fumes emanating from his body. It had been a long time since Cassis had used his killing butterflies. They were far too easily driven into a frenzy by human blood. Using them on Lant would have made things much simpler. But he had stubbornly wanted to give Cassis a chance, to let him play the role of righteous judge. Sister Rosanna, Jeremy, following the butterflies, was the first to find her. Sister, are you hurt? Why are you looking at me like that? Jeremy was deeply uneasy, his lip trembling. Rosanna's gaze felt like a final goodbye. He had always known she wanted to see the Agrish family fall, and he hadn't cared. He would follow her anywhere. But seeing her eyes now, a chilling realization struck him. She hadn't planned on taking him with her. Rosanna, seeing her brother's hurt expression, offered a faint smile. I shouldn't have been so kind to you. I shouldn't have kept you by my side. I won't take anything from the Agrish family with me. So, this is where we part. Goodbye. Jeremy stood frozen, listening to her words, his body feeling leaden. Sister, he whispered, I know you've never truly smiled. If I make the Agrish family a place where you can smile, will you come back? Rosanna looked back at him one last time, her expression unreadable. She recalled a warm, gentle smile, but couldn't make any promises. Even if this place became a warm spring, it would always feel cold to her. She was finally free. In the biting wind and snow, her figure swayed, unable to support itself any longer. She collapsed. Before her vision faded completely, she saw a flash of gold. Rosanna had no hope left for her own life. She had accepted that death was imminent. But then she opened her eyes. Unexpectedly, she found herself in a carriage headed for Pedrian. She had deliberately opened the Agrish gates after the reconciliation meeting, because if Cassis attended the meeting, it meant he was ready to make his move against the Agrish family. She just hadn't expected to be taken. She stepped down from the carriage. All eyes were on her. Why did you bring me here? Am I your prisoner or a trophy? Cassis reached out and touched her forehead. You're feverish again. He ordered his men to set up camp and rest. He wrapped his cloak around her and carried her back to the carriage. Wouldn't it be better to tie me up? I didn't know you had these kinds of tendencies. But unfortunately for you, I'm not that kind of person. What if I run away? I'll bring you back. Is it all the plotting that's making you feverish?" He covered her eyes with his hand. "Rest. There's nothing for you to worry about now." Rosanna's mind was hazy. She couldn't remember much of what had happened. Even though she was in enemy territory and had so many questions, she felt a calmness she hadn't experienced in the Agrisha state. She closed her eyes. "Have you risen, miss?" Someone knocked on the carriage door, bringing food. She sat up and opened the door. An attendant inquired if she needed anything. "Lord Cassis and Sir Winston have stepped away for a moment. They instructed me to attend to any of your needs. Mississippi, shall I prepare you something to eat?" "Yes." She closed the door, her expression blank. The food was prepared quickly. He carefully brought the bowl, his hand brushing against Rosanna's as he offered it. He quickly withdrew. "Thank you. I'll enjoy this. Your name is? You may call me Olin." His demeanor was respectful, not how one would treat a captive. She sighed softly. After 3 days of unconsciousness, the poison within her was still difficult to control. That's why she was being so cautious. She wondered how Cassis had cared for her during that time. After a few bites, she called Olin back to take the bowl, explaining her lack of appetite. A while later, Cassis returned. Rosanna called out to him. He immediately asked if she had eaten. Seeing Olin shake his head by the carriage, he asked Rosanna if she needed anything. He told her to ask Olin if he wasn't around. Rosanna nodded slightly. "I'd like to get some fresh air. It's quite cold, colder than before." She silently donned her cloak, showing her resolve. Cassis stepped back and helped her down from the carriage, leading her towards the warmest part of the camp. Seeing them approach, his men discreetly moved to a nearby bonfire, respectfully averting their gazes. A moment later, he returned with a bowl of soup and a spoon. "You don't think you're a creature that can survive on water alone, do you?" It was the first time in his life anyone had urged him to eat. A faint blush crept across Cassis's face, and he stirred the soup to hide his embarrassment. "So, you've been giving me water all this time?" A sudden chorus of coughs erupted from the men seated around the nearby bonfire, several choking on their food. "Eat it before it gets cold," Cassis said, his expression unchanged as he glanced sideways and urged his men to quickly disperse. "What happened to Landagrish?" Rosanna asked, wanting to know what had transpired in the last 3 days. "Simply put, things went as you wished." A small smile touched her lips. She was curious who had struck the final blow, but it didn't truly matter. "Your mother has left the estate." He paused, waiting for her to ask about the others. When she remained silent, he finally continued, his gaze fixed on her, searching for a reaction. "Everything went according to your plan. You don't seem very happy. What about you? Do you feel any sense of satisfaction after taking your revenge?" "It feels like I simply did what I had to. There's no particular joy, nothing beyond what I expected." "I feel much the same," Rosanna replied. Cassis abruptly stood and slowly approached her, his gaze intense as he looked in her eyes. "Were you trying to die that day? You looked like you were searching for your own grave." "You know, I don't have many days left." He was acutely aware that his body might not last another year. Just like in a novel, his life was tragically short. Wherever he drew his last breath, the poisonous butterflies would consume every last drop of his blood. Cassis's cold gaze rested on her face. "So, you're just waiting for death without any ambition or desire. Since you've already given up on your life, give your remaining time to me." Rosanna stared at him, bewildered, unable to comprehend his meaning. He gently took her hand and kissed it. "If your destination doesn't matter anymore, stay with me until the very end. If you believe you have no need for the rest of your life, then allow me to gratefully accept it." Orca, the head of the White family, obsessed with magical beasts, had been lying in wait at the monster GCD since the reconciliation meeting, hoping to capture and tame a Zalot king. Suddenly, a crimson tide swept across the snowy landscape, engulfing the white surface of the lake. He gaped in astonishment. Moments later, the enormous swarm of butterflies vanished, leaving only the pristine snow behind. Dejected, he hung his head. Butterflies in this weather? And what kind of butterflies could devour an entire pack of Zalots? The thought of poisonous butterflies struck him, and he decided to follow the direction in which they had disappeared, Pedrian. Olin was about to enter the tent where his colleagues were resting when he overheard them gossiping. "What's the deal between the young master and that woman?" was what he said last night a proposal. The atmosphere felt strangely charged. "How can you call her a captive? Our young master isn't like that. Isn't she his benefactor?" and she's incredibly beautiful. But then someone mentioned her short lifespan, and a heavy silence fell over the group as they imagined their master's tragic fate. Deciding to avoid being interrogated like the previous day, Olin turned to leave. He sensed someone nervously approaching from behind and assumed it was Cassis. Fortunately, it was Isidore. He brushed past Olin and entered the tent. "Did you think I couldn't hear your gossip from outside? This isn't the time for idle chatter." The atmosphere instantly tightened. Olin recalled the events of the past few days. He had initially thought Cassis had brought back a corpse. The person he carried, wrapped tightly in a cloak, had been completely concealed, save for a cascade of vibrant golden hair. She had regained consciousness while Cassis was away. She had fallen from the carriage, landing with a thud in the snow. The guard who witnessed it rushed to help her. "Are you all right?" But the moment he touched her, he began to sway. "I'll wait. Don't come near me," she warned. Poisonous fumes were already emanating from her. Thankfully, Cassis returned. He instantly assessed the situation. "Everyone stand back." He ignored the pleas of his men. The surrounding air grew thick with poison. Poisonous butterflies materialized, swirling around her. Without hesitation, he scooped the woman from the snow and lowered his head, pressing his lips to hers, sharing his life force. Those around him held their breath. He couldn't use the same method he had used to save Lant. While quick and effective, it was a brutal approach that disregarded the soul. Rosanna's body wouldn't be able to withstand it. He had to take it slowly. "No one approach her without my orders." Cassis gave his instructions, then carried her back to the carriage and began to tend to her personally. "Olin, bring the medicine and water I just had you prepare." Olin, along with the others, watched with bated breath as their master carried the young woman into the carriage. That night, the others questioned Isidore about the woman's identity. He decided it was best to tell them. "If I had to say, that woman is the young master's benefactor. So, you must treat her with respect. There can be no mistakes." His brief explanation surprised everyone in his silence, and no further questions were asked. After several bouts of fever, Rosanna's condition had slightly improved. She was contemplating whether she should offer her remaining, useless time to Cassis. The butterflies he had released earlier returned, energized after feasting in a mushroom habitat. The carriage suddenly lurched to a halt. Cassis entered and closed the door behind him. "Do you have some sort of hobby of tormenting your own body? I told you to rest." Rosanna knew he had sensed the poisoned butterflies. "Look, your complexion has paled again." Cassis frowned, reaching out as if to restore her health. Suddenly, she grabbed his collar and pulled him down, her lips pressing against his. "I knew it, but you really aren't affected by the poison in my body." When Rosanna next awoke, she was in a soft bed. A clean, elegant room greeted her. Flowers bloomed outside the window. It was much warmer here than at the Agrish estate. Her gaze drifted to a brother and sister in the courtyard below. They seemed to be deep in conversation. Soon, Sylvia departed. Noticing Cassis's gaze upon her, Rosanna drew the curtains closed. He opened the door. Just as he stepped into the corridor, a young woman approached. She carried a bouquet of flowers, her smile bright and welcoming. "Ah, you're awake." Meanwhile, Cassis had been summoned by his father for a reprimand. "What in the world were you thinking, bringing Lant Agrish's daughter here, especially one who's on the verge of death? Do you intend to repeat the same mistakes? What if I do? Will you condemn me?" Cassis Ledger, his father, Ledger, addressed him sternly. "We are the noble arbiters, the Phaedrians. Do not forget the meaning of that name." He knew very well what nobility entailed. To act rationally, to follow the natural order, to be infinitely noble and upright, to be free from desire, to feign indifference from beginning to end, and to never do what shouldn't be done. These family precepts were the complete opposite of the Agrish way. "This isn't the path I wish to walk. Perhaps I shouldn't be a Phaedrian." Cassis stared at his father, his expression unreadable. As a child, he had nearly killed his own sister. He had repeatedly attempted to kill Lant. Now, driven by personal feelings, he had brought Rosanna back and was trying to save her life with his own hands. He reaffirmed the fact that he wasn't suited to be a Phaedrian. Every time this thought crossed his mind, it brought him pain. Ledger silently observed his son. He had expected accusations, but instead, Cassis said, "I understand you. In the end, I was the one who saved Sylvia. This time, I couldn't forgive Lant for hurting you. Perhaps I simply wanted to use the Phaedrian name to justify my judgment. I believe that for someone as young as you, it's an unbearable burden. That's why I chose to forbid it. But 3 years ago, when I almost lost you, if it weren't for me, you'd have been taken. If you hadn't survived, I wouldn't have forgiven Lant, and I wouldn't have forgiven myself. The regret in his eyes was unmistakable. So do as you wish. Your will is strong enough. That is sufficient. Thank you, Father. Cassis slowly released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I'm grateful for your understanding. Don't waste your breath. It's not as if I've given you my permission, Ledger retorted, deliberately maintaining a gruff demeanor. Cassis gave a small smile. Finally, a reconciliation had been reached between father and son, the wall between them crumbling. Leaving his father's room, he went to see his mother, then made his way to Rosanna's room. She lay asleep on the bed, her breathing so shallow it was almost imperceptible. Cassis gently caressed her cheek. He wasn't sure what he felt. Pity wasn't the right word. He felt a strange pull towards her, a desire to understand her, to keep her alive. He wanted to see her eat with gusto, to see her smile as brightly as Sylvia. After a while, he quietly drew the curtains and left the room. Hello, are you awake? May I come in? Sylvia had been waiting outside for a long time. She was brimming with curiosity about Rosanna, ever since her brother had told her about his encounter at the Agrish estate. Give her a little more time. Sylvia was slightly disappointed, but happily went to prepare a bouquet to welcome Rosanna. When Rosanna awoke, she drew a bath, choosing to be alone. She gave a self-deprecating laugh. She had expected to die, yet here she was, sleeping peacefully and enjoying a bath. The image of Sylvia, the girl with the radiant smile, flashed through her mind. How about this flower? My brother told you to rest, so I didn't wake you. I was just going to leave the flowers at the door. Sylvia chattered like a lark. Waking up to flowers will brighten your mood, right? I'm going to the garden to pick the prettiest ones for you. But Sylvia's cheerful voice continued. When I think about you receiving them, the beauty of all other flowers fades. Her expression was warm and friendly, as if chatting with a long-lost acquaintance. Rosanna listened quietly as she spoke. The lively chatter beside her ear gradually subsided as Sylvia suddenly gasped, realizing her oversight. Oh, I apologize. I should have introduced myself first. Do you know who I am? She explained that they had met at the reconciliation meeting. Upon hearing this, Rosanna's faint smile widened. Rosanna stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. So, this was the sunny and vivacious heroine of the novel. At the reconciliation meeting, she had put on a mature facade. Sylvia was the same age as Jeremy. By the time Rosanna finished her bath, the sun had already set. She sat down on the sofa and promptly fell asleep. She awoke to find someone attempting to lift her onto the bed. Did you do something to me? She asked, suspicion lacing her voice. This constant drowsiness isn't normal. Don't tell me you're doing this to keep me from escaping. Cassis's expression remained impassive. Don't think about pointless things. It just means your body needs rest. Rosanna looked away. Put me down. I've slept enough today. Cassis, with a sigh, lowered her back onto the sofa. Where's your sister? She asked. She's next door, he replied. She said she'd see you after you bathed. I just took her back a little while ago. Cassis proceeded to instruct the servants to bring in dinner, his gaze fixed on Rosanna as she ate. Your sister seems to have taken a liking to me, Rosanna commented, trying to distract him from scrutinizing her every bite. She glanced at the fresh flowers Sylvia had left on the table, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. What had Sylvia done to make his sister so welcoming? The other Phaedrians must know she was awake by now. She wondered how they would react to the person who had destroyed their family, the one deemed heartless. Ledger's acceptance seemed unlikely. After all, her actions contradicted the Phaedrian beliefs. That made Sylvia's reaction even more surprising. It's very quiet here, she observed. There's hardly anyone around. This is a guest house. It's usually empty. Rosanna could guess why he had placed her here. His own poisonous energy was out of control, and she was in a Agrish. My hand is getting slower, she murmured, picking up her fork again. Eat a little more. Cassis's attention remained firmly fixed on her meal. She ate a few more bites, too tired to argue, even though the question of why he was doing this lingered in her mind. I'm not hungry anymore, she finally declared. I want to be alone. Rosanna began to dismiss him. Cassis glanced at her bowl, deeming it sufficiently empty. Just tell the servants if you need anything. If you need me, I'll be right across the hall. What? Your room is across the hall? She looked at him incredulously. I'll be staying in the guest house for a while. Is there a problem with that? He didn't seem to care what she thought. News of the Agrish family's demise quickly spread to the other three families. Ruzak of the Red family was unconcerned, figuring his headstrong mother would handle it. The moment Jeremy heard the news, his mind conjured the image of Rosanna, the last time he had seen her, along with her arrogant younger brother. He briefly considered asking about their fate, but more pressing matters, like the recent avalanche, demanded his attention. Noel of the Imperial family was heartbroken. He desperately wanted to know what had become of Luna, the moon goddess he had fallen in love with at first sight. But she rejected you at the reconciliation meeting. How could she be yours? Someone protested. Rejected? She accepted the flowers. Noel argued, his logic flawed. Where's Luna? This isn't over. Dante, have you made Noel cry again? A gentle voice inquired. The golden-haired youth, Nyx, Noel's favorite doll, spoke. Luna is gone. Something I wanted to steal has been taken by someone else. Dante frowned. Observing the seemingly close pair, a flicker of disgust crossed Dante's face. Nyx, is this the woman Noel fell for at first sight? How intriguing. Shall I find her for you? Really? Can you find her? Of course. I am a most perfect doll you created. A twisted glint flashed in Nyx's eyes. Meanwhile, Orca of the White family continued his aimless search for the red butterflies. He had glimpsed someone resembling a Phaedrian in the direction the butterflies had vanished, but had avoided contact to prevent any complications. Orca's cousin, Pandora, descended from the sky. With pale blue hair and dark circles under her eyes, she too was a magician. Her familiar was a black-winged Terobi. Pandora saw Orca heading towards Phaedrian. I can't just leave you to it, she sighed. Why are you here of all times? What do you mean? What's wrong with being here now? Orca asked, bewildered. Pandora rolled her eyes. You're so slow on the uptake. She relayed the events between the Agrishes and the Phaedrians. Orca, however, remained indifferent. Who cares about the Agrishes? I've always wanted to chop them down to size. Seeing his disinterest, Pandora reluctantly shared a piece of gossip. Cassis took a beautiful young woman from the Agrish estate. This news, unlike the Agrish downfall, piqued Orca's interest. So, Cassis and that young woman were among the group I saw the other day. Just then, a swarm of red butterflies flitted across his vision, erasing everything else from his mind. You should just go back, Pandora said, mounting her familiar. Orca grabbed onto its leg. Let's go. We have to chase those poisoned butterflies. Pandora, clueless about his sudden obsession, took off, bewildered. After Rosanna destroyed the Agrish family, Cassis brought her to Phaedrian. Sylvia, having heard about Rosanna from her brother, had always imagined her as a sort of imaginary friend. Delighted to finally meet her, and seeing Rosanna's health improving, Sylvia immediately took her hand and led her on a tour of her garden. Rosanna didn't dislike the cheerful Sylvia. She followed along, listening as Sylvia described the various flowers. Cassis trailed behind them, constantly regulating the poisonous energy within Rosanna. He ensured she could touch the flowers without causing them to wither. The Agrish courtyard also had flowers blooming all year round. Did they smell as sweet as these? Sylvia asked. Rosanna replied calmly. They did smell nice. They were right outside my window. Anyone without immunity would die within 5 minutes of being near them. Sylvia's eyes widened in disbelief. But when their gazes met, Rosanna offered a small smile, and Sylvia laughed along. Oh, you were joking. Cassis, however, knew it wasn't a joke. As they continued chatting, Rosanna's gaze drifted into the distance. Perhaps a peaceful life like this wouldn't be so bad, she mused. Every time she drifted like this, Cassis yearned for her attention. Let's go back inside, he said. As their eyes met, Cassis, seeing her bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, felt a primal urge to keep her hidden away. As dusk deepened outside, Cassis returned to his room and heard her cheerful greeting. Come in, she said, welcoming him into her room. But the sight of wine on the table dampened his mood. While not forbidden, Cassis wished for her to avoid anything that could strain her health. Do you have any desires you can't fulfill? She asked, a knowing smile playing on her lips, as if reading his thoughts. She poured him a glass. Here's your share. Consider it a table fee. A small smile touched Cassis's lips. The view is quite nice from here, Rosanna commented, gazing out the window. I can change your room if you like, Cassis offered, following her gaze. It's all right. I can come here whenever I want to see it. And so, they fell into a comfortable silence, watching the scenery together. You're barefoot again, Cassis noticed. I'll get you another pair if those are uncomfortable. He remembered she had left her shoes on the floor. Beautiful, soft, and comfortable shoes. He couldn't bring himself to take them, just like everything else in Pedrian. Cassis watched her for a moment, then gently lifted her and carried her back to her room. He retrieved her shoes and knelt, slipping them on her feet. His hand tightened around her ankle like a shackle, but he did nothing more. He turned to leave. "I'll call you for dinner. Rest for now." The next day, chaos erupted at the main gate of Pedrian. Isidore reported that Orca of the White family, claiming acquaintance with the young master, had arrived for a visit. Cassis, however, felt no such familiarity and suspected ulterior motives. He ordered his men to send Orca away. Orca, having journeyed so far for the poisoned butterflies, refused to give up at the gate. An hour later, he scaled the walls using a flying familiar. "Oops, my deepest apologies for the intrusion," he exclaimed, unfazed even after being apprehended and tied up by the guards. He offered a flippant excuse. "I was exploring nearby monster habitats and didn't realize this was Pedrian's wall. Terribly sorry." Pandora, captured alongside him, seethed. She couldn't believe he'd used her Tarobi for such a ridiculous stunt. She felt the sting of being partnered with a complete idiot. When Orca finally saw Cassis, his face lit up with exaggerated delight. "The esteemed young master of Pedrian, my dearest friend, it's been ages, and you so coldly refused my visit. I'm overjoyed to see you again." Cassis regarded him with an icy stare. He had no recollection of such a friendship. "State your purpose for coming here," he said curtly. "Hospitality will be considered after." "Oh, nothing special," Orca replied with a wide, disingenuous smile. "I was just in the neighborhood, thought I'd drop by and say hello." Cassis's expression grew even colder at the blatant lie. "Is that truly all? Then there's nothing more to discuss." "However," Cassis continued, "as I've technically trespassed, I suppose I should be detained for questioning." He couldn't fathom Orca's eagerness to stay, but he had no choice but to confine him and Pandora temporarily, pending a response from the White family. He also confiscated their familiar summoning accessories. Orca nonchalantly handed over his pendant, then, with an air of casual curiosity, inquired, "Is the food here any good? I've been living on rotted meat and weeds in the wilderness. My mouth tastes like a bird's nest." Pandora, on the other hand, was fuming. She glared at Orca as he greedily stuffed his face. "What in the world are you doing? Have you no regard for our family's standing? The head of the White family would have a stroke. Are you using me?" The realization that Orca had used her familiar to scale the wall, leaving her to take the fall, hit her like a ton of bricks. Orca, with characteristic shamelessness, replied, "Well, yeah, I'm using you. You agreed to it, didn't you? What's so strange about that? I didn't bring a flying familiar. If it weren't for you, I would have given up on those poisoned butterflies, even after finding them. Isn't this fate? All I need to do is waste a few days here and find them." Pandora was practically spitting fire by this point. Meanwhile, Rosanna, noticing Cassis's distraction, inquired, "Is something happening outside? It seems a bit chaotic." "Not guests," Cassis replied dismissively. "Uninvited guests. Shouldn't you attend to them, then?" Rosanna asked. Cassis's tone was firm. "They're not guests." Rosanna almost laughed. "Even so, they're from the White family. Is it appropriate to treat them this way?" Cassis paused, his hands hovering over his water glass. He glanced at Rosanna, a casual expression on his face, then suddenly remembered something he'd momentarily forgotten. A faint, familiar scent lingered in the air outside. Just as he suspected, Rosanna, through her poisoned butterflies, was aware of Orca's presence in Pedrian. "I don't mind either way," Rosanna said, lowering her head to continue her meal. Cassis didn't press the matter. He frowned at the food on his plate, his appetite waning. He didn't want to discuss Orca with Rosanna. Later that night, Rosanna sat on the edge of her bed, lost in thought. She hadn't yet met the head and mistress of Pedrian. She'd heard they'd left the day she arrived, and she couldn't help but wonder if her presence was unwelcome. Although curious, she hadn't asked Cassis about it, nor did she feel the need to send her butterflies to uncover the truth. The matter remained unresolved. She took out a small knife she'd secretly kept and made a cut on her arm. Her poisoned butterflies swarmed her, eagerly drinking the blood that welled from the wound and dripped onto the knife, leaving nothing behind. After a while, Rosanna sighed. "Don't look at me like that," she said. Cassis stood in the doorway, his face obscured by the shadows, his expression unreadable. "I need to feed them anyway, before I die." Cassis didn't reply. He walked silently into the room and looked down at her, his face impassive. He placed his hands over her wound, and the butterflies, drawn to the fresh blood that seeped through his fingers, vanished as the cut healed instantly. Rosanna stared at him, dumbfounded. "That's convenient," she remarked. "Since it's healed, can you cut me again? I haven't fed them properly in a while. I want to feed them more." Cassis's gaze grew even colder. She blinked slowly. "Fine," she conceded. "Let's stop for today." She watched him put away the knife, then asked abruptly, "Why don't you do anything to me?" Rosanna rose from the window seat and approached him, like a goddess emerging from the night. She looked directly at him. "When you see me, don't you want to touch me? Kiss me? Your heart is beating fast right now." Her elegant hand drifted to his chest, a delicate fragrance emanating from her skin. She wasn't trying to seduce him. She simply couldn't understand his restraint and sought confirmation. In that moment, everything about her was intensely alluring to him, and that was precisely the problem. Finally, Cassis responded, his voice low, "You speak as if you know my heart completely." Rosanna closed her eyes and countered, "Am I wrong?" "No," he admitted readily. He covered her hand on his chest with his own and brought it to his lips. "Would it have been all right if I hadn't been the one to reach out to you that day?" "If it hadn't been you," she replied, her eyes still closed, "I wouldn't have said those things." Her breath hitched as a sudden gust of wind swept through the room. It seemed to emanate from behind her, from the direction of the window, yet it felt stronger, almost overwhelming, where Cassis stood. After a moment, he watched a small smile spread across her face. "I was just saying," he murmured, "the night air is cool. Put on your nightgown and sleep." He bid her good night and left, leaving Rosanna standing motionless in the same spot for a long time. It wasn't long before Orca and Pandora were released from their initial confinement, though they remained under close watch. Word of Orca's reckless intrusion spread quickly, and the White family, seemingly accustomed to his antics, responded swiftly. Keen to maintain good relations, Pedrian extended a formal dinner invitation to the two trespassers, a gesture of courtesy despite their brazen entry. Cassis, however, remained wary, assigning guards to ensure Orca didn't disturb Rosanna. Sylvia, chatting with Rosanna, explained the increased security. She, too, disliked uninvited guests who scaled walls. But as they were formally hosting them that evening, it meant she wouldn't see Cassis. "Will you miss him?" she asked, a playful glint in her eyes. Rosanna's response was flat. "Not particularly." Sylvia's smile turned knowing. "If dinner runs long," she offered conspiratorially, "I'll find a way to get him away." Rosanna offered no explanation. Her concern lay elsewhere. This would be Sylvia and Orca's first official meeting. Would he, as in the novel she'd read, develop a twisted obsession with Sylvia? The thought lingered unspoken. As Rosanna opened her mouth to speak, Sylvia did the same. Hesitating, Rosanna yielded. "You go first." Sylvia paused, then, with a newfound resolve, asked, "Can I touch your hair?" Taken aback by the unexpected request, Rosanna simply nodded, a blush rising on her cheeks. Sylvia sprang from her seat and, with a light, almost dancing step, moved behind Rosanna. "It's so beautiful, like silk," she breathed, her fingers tracing the strands of Rosanna's long, shimmering hair. Could I braid it?" she asked hesitantly. "Do as you please," Rosanna replied. Sylvia, delighted as a child given a sweet, began to gently work with Rosanna's hair. Lost in the moment, Rosanna forgot what she'd meant to say. After Sylvia left, Cassis entered Rosanna's room. He stopped dead, his gaze fixed on her hair, now styled in a loose braid tied with a yellow ribbon the exact shade of his eyes. "Is it strange?" Rosanna asked. "Did Sylvia do this?" "No," Cassis answered without hesitation. In his mind, there was no hairstyle that wouldn't suit Rosanna. But this particular style, it matched Orca's. Sylvia, having never met Orca, wouldn't know. But Rosanna had. Cassis stood silently for a moment, then stepped closer. "Did you ask Sylvia to do this?" he inquired. "I told her she could do whatever she liked," Rosanna replied, seemingly oblivious to his thoughts. Cassis's fingers hovered near the ribbon, a barely concealed urge to snatch it out and discard it. He restrained himself, his fierce gaze softening. "I won't be able to join you for dinner tonight," he said. "I'll return as soon as I can. Don't skip your meal." He feigned ignorance of the flicker of displeasure on Rosanna's face. "I'll be back soon." Throughout the dinner, Cassis's expression remained frigid. The thought of entertaining someone who'd scaled his walls was galling. Orca, meanwhile, directed a relentless stream of compliments and thinly veiled inquiries towards Sylvia, praising her beauty and asking about her fondness for butterflies, all in an attempt to glean information. Even Cassis's threats to confine him again couldn't deter Orca's blatant flirting with his sister. Finally, after a brief period of normal conversation, Orca abruptly clutched his stomach, his face contorted in apparent pain. Perhaps a bit too much wild vegetation, he muttered, beads of sweat forming on his brow. Nature calling, as it were. Pandora, mortified, hissed at him to hurry up and not swear. The White family's casual disregard for decorum was truly remarkable. Sylvia, ever polite, struggled to find a suitable compliment for Orca's sudden departure. If there were a mouse hole, Pandora muttered under her breath, he'd have disappeared down it by now. Cassius, however, missed nothing. He subtly signaled for a servant to follow Orca. Left to deal with the aftermath, Pandora apologized profusely. After all, her familiar had been the one used to scale the wall. While outwardly defending Orca, she inwardly cursed him 1,000 times. Maintaining her family's reputation, she explained that they had inadvertently trespassed while searching for a magical creature's habitat. The Green family is quite familiar with such pursuits, Cassius replied coldly, his tone brooking no argument. We've already received correspondence from the White family. Further explanation is unnecessary. Pandora stole glances at Cassius throughout the remaining dinner. She'd previously considered Ruzak of the Red family her preferred type, but now, Cassius was remarkably appealing. The thought of making him hers crossed her mind. Is there something on my face, brother? Sylvia asked suddenly, interrupting Pandora's train of thought. Or is something wrong? You keep staring at her. Pandora quickly recovered. No, just lost in thought. Sylvia looked relieved. It was the same during dinner. The Whites seemed to enjoy their own company. The one who just left, too. It was like he was in another world while we were talking. You were doing the same? Lost in your own thoughts. Is that a Pedrian trait? It's quite fascinating. Pandora felt a pang of shame. Were they really that obvious? To be compared to Orca, the humiliation stung. But looking at Sylvia's bright, innocent smile, Pandora couldn't detect any ill will. Sylvia, Cassius called sharply, his voice low. Do you think so too, brother? Sylvia asked, oblivious to the reason for Cassius's summons, her smile unwavering. Pandora's exasperation deepened. Cassius, however, didn't contradict his sister. While her observation was accurate, further discussion would only seem rude. Oh, really? I just thought they were quite charming, Sylvia continued, unfazed. If I offended you, I apologize. Pandora forced a smile. It's all right, she replied, swallowing her annoyance. With Sylvia's apology, pressing the issue further would appear petty. Silently, she cursed Orca's absence. Once outside, Orca's expression sharpened. The conversation had confirmed Sylvia wasn't the owner of the poisonous butterfly. Following the creature's faint magical signature, he broke into a trot, weaving through the gardens to evade the servant tailing him. His objective, Rosanna. Through his butterfly, he'd witnessed the events unfolding at the dinner table. Relieved that Orca seemed uninterested in Sylvia, Cassius nevertheless felt a prickle of unease at Pandora's lingering gaze. Rosanna's heart pounded. Should she have returned with Cassius? His presence had begun to affect her deeply. Leaning against the balcony railing, a sudden gust of wind snatched the yellow ribbon from her hair, the one Sylvia had used to tie her braid. The memory of Sylvia's cheerful ministration surfaced, and a pang of regret shot through her. She couldn't bear to lose it. A figure emerged from the bushes below, catching the falling ribbon. He looked up, his eyes widening as he gazed at Rosanna on the balcony above, his breath catching in his throat. A monster? Is it a monster? He murmured, bewildered. A newly evolved humanoid monster? I've never heard of such a thing. Orca of the White family. Cassius's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. You trespass on my estate without permission. It seems you haven't heeded my warning. Alerted to Orca's movements, Cassius had followed him. He glanced at Rosanna before fixing his gaze back on the intruder. What? Can only I see her? Orca muttered, still mesmerized. Is she a spirit? He assumed Cassius couldn't see Rosanna on the balcony. Such beauty, he thought, couldn't be ignored. He stared at Cassius, dazed, offering no resistance as the guards led him away. Why are you outside? Cassius asked Rosanna, his voice softening. The guards behind him discreetly withdrew. Rosanna met Cassius's gaze, sensing his displeasure. I was waiting for you, she said softly. Do you need to return to the dinner? No, he replied, returning earlier than expected, as promised. Come inside. I'll stay in your room. He made no mention of Orca. He simply ate dinner with her, a silent companion. As Cassius had predicted, the Phaedrian couple was away. Returning after 10 days, they requested a meeting with Rosanna in Isidore's office. Rosanna, bracing herself for a cold reception, was surprised. Not only had they prepared tea, but they waited patiently for her to finish before addressing the matter at hand. The unexpected courtesy calmed Rosanna's nerves. "Stay as long as you like," Isidore said, his words echoing in the quiet room. Rosanna blinked, wondering if she'd misheard. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Isidore asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "I thought you would ask me to leave," Rosanna admitted. "And if I did, would you leave immediately?" Isidore asked, setting down his teacup. "Of course, there's no reason not to welcome you. Cassis received a great deal of help from you 3 years ago at the Agrish estate." Rosanna stared at the tea in her cup. "Perhaps the truth is different from what you believe," she said quietly. "It wasn't a selfless act. I had my own reasons for helping him." She remained silent, allowing Isidore to maintain his favorable impression. Perhaps that was why they were allowing her to stay. Rarely is there only one reason for any action, be it good or bad, Isidore said gently. Isn't the result the same? Even if the giver doesn't intend kindness, if the receiver perceives it as such, the original intention becomes irrelevant. Besides, Cassis doesn't seem to mind. "What was your intention, Rosanna?" Isidore's gentle tone disarmed her. She didn't know how to respond. He then relayed news of the Agrish family. "Cassis said you can choose whichever side you wish," he concluded. Leaving the office, Rosanna encountered the mistress of the Phaedrian household. Rosanna recognized her instantly. The woman's eyes widened momentarily before her expression smoothed. "It seems you've finished," she said. "Yes, I just left," Rosanna replied. "I apologize for not visiting you sooner. My name is Rosanna. It's a pleasure to meet you, Rosanna." "I'm Joan," the woman replied warmly. "Don't apologize. We've been away. I'd love to chat longer, but I see Cassis waiting for you. As a welcome, I'd like to invite you for tea soon. I'll send word." Rosanna observed Joan, a complex mix of emotions swirling within her. "Thank you for your kindness," she murmured in response to the invitation. As she and Cassis walked side by side, they encountered the Wyperian siblings. Upon seeing Rosanna, Orca erupted into another bout of bewildered pronouncements. "I've been suspicious all along. Seeing her like this, she's real, isn't she? Sister, you can see her too, right? Is she some kind of spirit?" Pandora, equally astonished, gaped at Rosanna. "Oh my goodness, is she a mythical sylph? Or a pneuma, thought to be extinct?" Once again, both siblings mistook Rosanna for some otherworldly being. Cassis glared at Orca, his fingers itching to snap the other man's pointing hand. "Let's go," he said curtly to Rosanna, eager to escape the pair's bizarre pronouncements. Rosanna, sharing his sentiment, readily agreed. Now, Cassis said, attempting to regain control of the situation as the siblings continued their oblivious chatter. Once they were out of the hallway, Rosanna raised a hand to shield her eyes from the sudden glare of the sun. Mistaking this for dizziness, Cassis reacted instantly. Without hesitation, he swept her into his arms, ignoring her protests. Resigned, Rosanna rested her chin on his shoulder, burying her face against him as she caught the shocked expressions of the servants and Sylvia's amused smile from where she ducked out of sight. Back at the annex, security had been tightened to prevent Orca's escape. "No matter what happens, I will protect you," Cassis assured her. His words, spoken with utter conviction, resonated deeply. The feeling of being protected was a strange, unfamiliar sensation. Perhaps, she mused, it was because Cassis constantly treated her as fragile, and now others were following suit. Once again in Cassis's room, Rosanna found herself drawn to his bed, which seemed inexplicably more comfortable than her own. The scent of his linens brought a sense of calm. Even back at the Agrish estate, the thought of Cassis had always eased her anxieties. She drifted off to sleep, her dreams transporting her back to Agrish. She was in Dante's office, wearing Cassis's clothes, sipping wine, and instructing Jeremy to protect their subordinates. A sudden chill against her cheek startled her awake. The icy touch evoked the memory of someone, but the sensation was too gentle, too caring. He wouldn't be so tender. The dissonance jolted her fully awake. Blinking in the dim light, she saw a shadowy figure looming over her. He's finally here, she thought, and the name of the man from her dreams slipped out, Dean. The hand on her face stilled. As her vision cleared, she saw Cassis. "Did you just call out for Dean?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. A storm brewed in his eyes. "Why would you say that name? Sleeping in my room." A smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. Rosanna sat up. "It was just a dream," she murmured, her heart pounding. You call me father during the reconciliation meeting as well. It seems he haunts even your dreams." His voice was dry, devoid of warmth. Rosanna edged back, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Cassis leaned closer. His hand covered hers, pinning her in place. His thoughts, however, were different from what she assumed. He didn't know whether Dean was alive or dead. If he were alive, he would come for her, no matter where she was. In his mind, the only possible ending was Dean's death at his own hands. "Do you want to return to Agrish?" he asked, his voice tight. "I won't let you go." A wry smile touched Rosanna's lips. If Cassis was the one pursuing her, she would willingly be caught. His lips descended on hers, not with the gentle pressure of their usual exchange of energy, but with a fierce, almost desperate intensity. For a moment, Rosanna thought it wouldn't be so bad to die like this. But with Cassis, she felt cherished, precious. It made her realize that she, too, deserved to live, to be loved. No one was chasing her away. Instead, she was welcomed. She reached up, her fingers twining around his neck, pulling him closer. Even if it was fleeting, she wanted him. Waking up this morning, she realized, had been the most peaceful she'd felt in a long time. Only, the man beside her hadn't opened his eyes. Cassis stood on the terrace, questioning Ollie, who had been keeping watch. The young master went to see the head. He said he'd be back before 1. He should be on his way now. Using the pretense of a stroll, Rosanna set out to meet him. She encountered numerous guards along the way, all posted to keep Orca contained. Though surprised to see her, they greeted her respectfully. She hadn't gone far when she saw Cassis talking with Pandora. Pandora was beaming, clearly enjoying the conversation. Cassis, however, wore a markedly different expression. Rosanna narrowed her eyes at the alluring woman. Pandora's gestures and glances were undeniably flirtatious. If it weren't for Cassis's presence, Rosanna might have acknowledged her beauty. Now, she only saw a rival. Cassis, sensing someone approaching, turned. Surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by tenderness as he saw Rosanna. Ignoring Pandora, he strode towards her, concern evident in his eyes. "Why are you out here?" he asked. "You're still not fully recovered. Why didn't you wake me before going out this morning?" Rosanna asked, placing her hand possessively on Cassis's arm. He stiffened momentarily before regaining his composure. It was the first time he'd heard her speak to him in such a sweet tone. "You were sleeping so soundly," he replied. "I thought it best not to disturb you." Rosanna exhaled softly, deliberately lowering her voice. "Because you kept me up," she murmured, the implication hanging heavy in the air. The nearby guards were too far away to hear, but Pandora, standing close by, undoubtedly caught the remark. Although their interactions the previous night had been intimate, Cassis had stopped short of crossing the final line, respecting Rosanna's weakened state. Playing along, he replied smoothly, "Yes, I was rather inconsiderate last night. I'll be more mindful in the future." Pandora listened stiffly to their exchange, then cleared her throat, breaking the spell. "Oh, so you're the guest who arrived at the Phaedrian estate before us," she said, feigning recognition of Rosanna. Rosanna, in turn, pretended to just notice Pandora. "Yes," she replied with a faint smile. "We met briefly in the hallway." Pandora's eyes glazed over momentarily at Rosanna's smile, but she quickly recovered. "I'm Pandora Wyperian, and your name is?" "Rosanna," she replied. "Where is your brother? I'd like to return his hair ribbon." Cassis, who had remained silent until now, spoke up sharply at the mention of Orca. "Just give it to Sylvia," he said, unwilling to let another man handle something so intimately connected to Rosanna. "Sister Rosanna," Pandora interjected sweetly, "would you care to join me for a stroll in the garden?" Rosanna agreed. Ever since their first encounter 3 years ago, she had felt a sense of ownership over Cassis. Now, she felt as though someone was trying to steal him away. Although Cassis offered to accompany them, Rosanna declined. This was a battle between two women. He had no place in it. Pandora, captivated by Rosanna's beauty, felt a familiar pang of infatuation. She seemed almost unreal. Pandora felt a twinge of shame for her earlier dismissive remarks about Rosanna being like dirt. "What were you discussing with Cassis?" she asked. "Young Master Cassis," returned my familiar. "I was expressing my gratitude." Listening to Rosanna's melodious voice, Pandora marveled at how much care the creator must have taken in crafting her. Rosanna's delicate, youthful appearance even stirred a protective instinct within Pandora. She schooled her expression. Perhaps a little intimidation would be enough to make this fragile woman back down. With Cassis as the prize, the two women circled each other warily. "Have you been close with the young master of the Phaedrian family since 3 years ago, like this?" Pandora asked, attempting to gauge the depth of their relationship. "Yes," Rosanna replied, her voice unwavering. "From the moment we met, he has been mine." Pandora stopped walking and met Rosanna's gaze. "Miss Rosanna," she said, "while I bear you no ill will, I have a certain tenacity. Anything I want, I must have. Otherwise, it bothers me." "So do I," Rosanna thought, maintaining an innocent expression. "Therefore, I particularly dislike you standing next to the man I desire." The jeweled bracelets on Pandora's wrist jingled as a gust of wind swept through the garden. Pandora summoned her familiar. "I want you to disappear from my sight." A large, black form materialized, crackling with ominous dark energy. The familiar opened its maw as if to devour Rosanna whole. Her eyes widened, but the sound that escaped her lips was far from a scream of terror. "Oh, what a pity," she said, a smile playing on her lips. "I hadn't intended to do this, but you've initiated this confrontation. I won't shy away." Before Pandora could comprehend her meaning, Rosanna's smile vanished. In a blur of crimson, Rosanna's figure was enveloped in a flurry of motion. "Then, let's begin," she whispered. Orca, initially intending to find Pandora and lure the guests from the annex outside, overheard the news of Pandora and Rosanna's private meeting. He cursed his impulsive solo act. It seemed Pandora's interest was genuine. Cassis was finally determined to eliminate the perceived threat. But the thought of Pandora being harmed by the woman, if she truly was the poison butterfly's master, was unsettling. The prospect of seeing the woman from the annex again filled Orca with a strange excitement. He began to chuckle, then stopped abruptly as he sensed the presence of Pandora's familiar nearby. Summoning a familiar in broad daylight was reckless. He wondered if Pandora had lost her mind. Pandora had chosen a weak, stealthy familiar, intending only to frighten Rosanna. Orca watched in stunned silence as the red butterfly vanished before his eyes. Pandora stared blankly, her lips trembling, at the poisoned butterfly now coiled menacingly behind Rosanna. Any beast tamer would covet a rare familiar like the poisoned butterfly. Something so insignificant, and you thought to threaten me with it? Rosanna's voice was soft, but her eyes held a chilling glint. "I apologize, but Cassis is already mine. I won't tolerate anyone trying to take what belongs to me." Sensing a gaze upon her, Rosanna turned swiftly. In the distance, she saw Cassis and Orca watching her. Orca, adorned with an array of jewelry, trembled, his gaze fixed on Rosanna with a possessiveness that bordered on predatory. But it was Cassis who held Rosanna's attention. She quickly dismissed her butterfly familiar, wondering how long he had been standing there. Had he seen everything? As he approached, she instinctively leaned into him, a silent plea for understanding. "I didn't start it," she murmured. Cassis, without a word, swept her into his arms and turned to face Pandora. "The Green and Wyperian families have always maintained a cordial relationship," he stated coldly. "But you have threatened someone who belongs to me. From this point forward, consider yourselves unwelcome guests." Pandora, still reeling from the recent events, stood frozen in place. Cassis reclaimed Pandora's familiar and forbade her from leaving the estate for an extended period. The phrase, "someone who belongs to me," sent a thrill through Rosanna. If you're truly worried, she thought, you could tend to my wounds yourself. Just like last night. Cassis paused mid-stride, his gaze locking with hers, a flicker of desire in his eyes. Rosanna smiled. It seemed she wasn't the only one left wanting from the previous night. Back in the annex, they wasted no time in rekindling their passion. Jeremy stood before the ruins of the Agrish estate, surveying the reconstruction efforts. His face was creased with a mixture of weariness and grim satisfaction. "What a mess," he muttered. "But as the head of the family, I can't complain." A small, self-satisfied chuckle escaped his lips. While still alive, Land had sent official documents to the other families, confessing to Agrish's wrongdoings and crimes. This prevented any further repercussions against the Phaedrians and forced an acknowledgement of Agrish's actions. Jeremy was determined to carry this burden of shame and rebuild. He had attended the reconciliation meeting and, after much struggle, had been recognized as the new head of Agrish. It hadn't been easy. He'd had to endure humiliation and feign respect to achieve his goals. But the thought of creating a place where his sister would want to return made it all worthwhile. The Agrish estate, once a symbol of power, now lay in ruins after the rebellion. Driven by the desire to rebuild for Rosanna, Jeremy had taken on the mantle of leadership. Hearing a rustling sound in the distance, he recalled the portly magician who had snooped around the familiar breeding grounds. The magician had escaped on a bird-like familiar after being discovered. This time, Jeremy wouldn't let him get away. He followed the sound, only to find Maria. "My God, what are you wearing? And where are you going?" he asked, taking in her usual flamboyant attire, complete with a parasol and light luggage. Maria beamed. "I'm going to find Shara," she replied. Jeremy groaned, a headache forming. That stubborn woman. To prevent her from interfering with Rosanna's plans during the rebellion, he had drugged her, ensuring she slept through the entire ordeal. Upon waking, she had flown into a hysterical rage, not because her husband was dead or her son missing, but because Rosanna's mother, Shara, was gone. Jeremy had vowed never to reveal his role in her unconsciousness. "Why are you looking for Shara?" he asked, feigning ignorance. "Why do you ask?" Maria retorted. "I'm going to protect her, of course. Aren't you curious about Dean? He's your son," Jeremy pointed out, less out of concern for Dean and more out of bewilderment that Shara seemed to take precedence over her own child. Perhaps everyone in Agrish was a little mad. "That child is not so easily killed," Maria declared. "Besides, he's the type who decides where he dies. But Shara is different." Jeremy gave her a strange look. "Do as you please," he said, "but understand, Shara is no longer part of Agrish." His words, though harsh, reflected the precarious state of the rebuilding estate. They couldn't afford any unforeseen incidents. "Don't worry, I don't need Agrish protection," Maria sighed, looking at Jeremy with a hint of fondness. She sensed the hidden concern beneath his gruff exterior. "You were such a sweet child," she reminisced. "But Agrish children grow up to be so unpleasant, especially the boys. They become secretive and devious. I long to see Shara and Rosanna again." Her bright smile returned. "If you ever have children," she offered, "contact me. I'll cherish them as I cherished you." "Don't bother me," Jeremy grumbled. "Just go." He shuddered at the thought of his future offspring being cherished by the bloodthirsty Maria. Maria departed with a cheerful wave, displaying no sign of sadness or regret. Meanwhile, in a small, dark room, Dean awoke, his body aching and weak. He struggled to sit up, only to find his limbs bound by heavy chains. "He's awake," someone said, leaving the room to summon Emily, Rosanna's familiar. Shortly after, Shara entered. Dean, despite his restraints, instinctively recoiled, seeking refuge behind Emily, as if even in chains he still needed protection from his own mother. Shara, feigning composure, explained that a doctor had treated him and that he'd been close to death. "You need plenty of rest," she urged. "Lie down for a while longer." Dean strained against his bonds, but his weakened body wouldn't cooperate. "Where am I?" he rasped. "What happened to Lant?" His questions hung unanswered. Neither Shara, Emily, nor Bess knew what to say. They could only encourage him to sleep. As Shara turned to leave, he cried out, "Why did you bring me here?" Shara didn't reply, simply slipping out of the room. Bess placed a lit candle on the table. Dean slowly closed his eyes, suspecting he was being kept alive for revenge. Elsewhere, Noel's familiar, Nyx, arrived at the Phaedrian estate, seeking the one who occupied Noel's every thought. He perched atop the towering trees, his gaze sweeping over the Phaedrian annex. "How unexpected," he mused, a wicked glint in his eye. "Two people from opposing families together. And he's the master of the poisoned butterfly, no less." He grinned, a mischievous, malevolent expression spreading across his face. Leaping from the tree, he hurried off to report his discovery to Noel. Meanwhile, Rosanna and Cassis lay entangled in bed, their passion having carried them from day into night. After 3 days and nights of unrestrained lovemaking, Rosanna finally surrendered. Cassis, usually so careful with her, had unleashed a side of himself she hadn't known existed. "Have I been too rough?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Are you just realizing that now?" Unrepentant, he suggested she build up her stamina. Otherwise, he teased, you'll tire too easily. Then, changing the subject, he added, your mother sent you another letter. Another? Rosanna questioned. What do you mean, another? 2 days ago, while you were sleeping, Cassis explained. She apparently wanted to invite you for tea, but I told a servant you weren't well. I know I shouldn't have done that, he continued, a genuine note of contrition in his voice. If I upset you, I apologize. The Cassis of this moment was a stark contrast to the seductive, honey-tongued creature of the past 3 days. Don't do that again, Rosanna murmured, though secretly, she had enjoyed their secluded time together. Cassis began to write a reply to Joan. Cassis told me you haven't been feeling well, Joan's letter read. A pang of guilt shot through Rosanna. Thank you for your concern, she wrote back. I was just a little tired and needed some rest. I heard there was some trouble at the estate recently. Rosanna knew Joan was referring to the incident with Pandora. She sensed an ulterior motive. Joan must have heard the rumors about the terrifying woman with the poison butterfly. I'm sorry for causing a disturbance, Rosanna wrote, choosing her words carefully. I heard it was the Wyperians who started it. Because it involved Cassis, Rosanna decided to take the blame. It wasn't necessary to eat their mushroom, Joan continued, seemingly unaware of the full story. You were ill for 3 days because of the poison butterfly, weren't you? I was so worried. Thank you for your concern, Rosanna replied. Thanks to Cassis's healing, she hadn't suffered any ill effect from summoning the butterfly. In fact, she felt invigorated, brimming with his energy. She couldn't reveal the true reason for her confinement, of course. I unintentionally caused you trouble, she wrote. Thanks to Cassis's care, I recovered quickly. Joan stared at the letter, stunned. After a moment, she whispered, do you know what kind of power Cassis possesses? Rosanna knew this was the real reason for Joan's letter. Unsure how to respond, she thought for a moment. Before writing, I know a little. So you knew. Joan's letter continued. Sylvia was quite the wild child. Once, she climbed onto the bronze statue in the courtyard and fell, injuring her head severely. Cassis, seeing this, used his power. Joan's writing became slightly blurred, as if she were reliving the memory. Sylvia had stopped breathing. I blamed Cassis, foolish boy. I don't remember exactly what I said, she continued, but I scolded him harshly. A brief silence hung between them, conveyed through the written words. Then, Joan's writing regained its composure. I don't recall my exact words, but Cassis surely does. I feel immense regret and shame. Have you told Cassis how you feel? Rosanna asked. I did, after he returned from Agrish, Joan replied. I don't believe I've atoned for my actions. Thinking back, if he hadn't returned, I would have carried that guilt forever. Rosanna, too, felt a surge of gratitude for Cassis's safe return. If he hadn't, the elegant woman before her, through the medium of the letter, wouldn't be wearing such a serene smile. Cassis can save anyone he wishes to now, Joan wrote. But I don't want him to. He looked directly at Rosanna. Despite this, I hope you are healthier than anyone else. Because your happiness is Cassis's happiness. Rosanna listened quietly, guilt prickling her conscience as she lowered her head. The last time I saw you, you seemed like an empty shell. I was worried, but seeing your complexion now, so much better than before, puts my mind at ease. I entrust Cassis to you. Rosanna felt the Phaedrians had a sharp eye for people, easily discerning her physical state. Recalling Joan's words, she sensed Cassis's abilities were more formidable than she'd imagined. If the backlash could kill, then it could also revive. Sylvia had stopped breathing. Could Cassis's father have resurrected her? If such power was hereditary, then what Cassis had done to her wasn't simply healing. The fleeting thought startled Rosanna. She had transmigrated into a novel, becoming a member of the most villainous family. After years of enduring hardship, she had single-handedly brought the family to ruin. Her devoted younger brother, driven by his love for her, was determined to create a home she'd willingly return to. The heroine's brother had chosen to take her in and raise her. Rosanna, despite her frail health, was having a busy day. Having just appeased Cassis's mother, she now faced Orca, blocking her path. Isidore trailed behind him, while Ollie, who had rushed from the annex, stood protectively at Rosanna's back. Every single one of them regarded her with extreme caution. Miss Rosanna, Orca began, his voice crisp and melodious. It's been a while. I heard you weren't feeling well. It seems you've recovered. His smile was warm and inviting. If Rosanna hadn't known who he was, she would have been completely charmed. So, it's the idiotic magician, she replied dryly. You know who I am? Of course. That's what the esteemed young master of Phaedrian called me. He seemed pleased to be recognized. Allow me to formally introduce myself. I am Orca Wyperian. It's a pleasure to meet you. However, I still prefer to call you the White Magician. Rosanna offered him a polite smile. I apologize for my rudeness last time. I hope you can forget my previous behavior. The exaggerated disappointment and feigned dejection on his face were remarkably convincing. Did you come here specifically to say that? Rosanna prompted, wanting him to get to the point. Well, the weather is lovely, and I was taking a stroll. As fate would have it, I happened upon Miss Rosanna. The lie was so blatant, she didn't bother calling him out on it. She suspected he was here because of the poisoned butterfly. If you wouldn't mind, could the people around us step back? We could have a pleasant conversation. Orca had barely finished speaking when both Ollie and Isidore refused in unison. They guarded her like she was precious treasure. With Pandora's previous actions fresh in their minds, there was no way they would allow him to be alone with the seemingly fragile Rosanna, especially not a man. Being so openly protected stirred a strange feeling within Rosanna. As a beast tamer, my knowledge is limited, Isidore interjected. Rather than speaking with me, perhaps you'd prefer to speak with Lady Joan. She's quite knowledgeable about magical creatures. Not that knowledgeable, Ollie countered. But if you wish, Miss Rosanna, I can certainly discuss the matter with you. He decided to sacrifice himself and deal with Orca rather than let Rosanna be bothered. How disappointing, Orca said with a look of disdain. He only wanted to speak with the master of the poison butterfly. Giving up on getting the others to leave, he cut straight to the chase. I am curious. How did you tame the poison butterfly? First of all, finding the poison butterfly's habitat is harder than climbing to the heavens. Even if you find it, successfully hatching them is a struggle. Taming them requires even more effort. But I hear you've trained them into killer butterflies. He couldn't help but chuckle. You should know that, to this day, the whereabouts of all previous poison butterfly masters are unknown. Did you know they were devoured by their own butterflies? For a moment, both Ollie and Isidore stiffened. Rosanna showed no fear, continuing to gaze at him languidly. Did you think I didn't know? Lant wanted the poison butterfly, yet he willingly let his daughter raise them, precisely for that reason. In the novel, Orca was a strange one. He was the heir to Wyperian, possessing a multitude of high-ranking familiars, yet he still used his own precious body to tame a firefox. How interesting. A beautiful smile graced her lips, but her eyes held a chilling glint. The firefox edged closer to Rosanna. In that instant, the dangerous aura surrounding Orca vanished, replaced by a veneer of sincerity. Miss Rosanna, he began again, I apologize for Pandora's transgression. It had nothing to do with me. Had I known she would be so disrespectful, I would have sent her home immediately. I'm serious. Despite his eloquent apology, Rosanna didn't believe a word. I stayed specifically to apologize in person. Of course, also personally quite like you. So please, don't be so wary of me. I swear, you look like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Regardless of what's happened so far, I have no desire to be friends with you, idiotic beast tamer. You bore me. I'm not interested in you, and your professed fondness won't sway me. Let's not waste each other's time. Isidore and Ollie seemed taken aback. It was the first time they had witnessed Rosanna so haughty, so unyielding, and so utterly blunt. I thought Miss Rosanna and I had a connection. Orca looked genuinely perplexed and flustered. It seemed to be the first time he'd been rejected by a woman. After a moment of silence, he returned Sylvia's ribbon. Deciding to head back to Wyperian, he offered a parting shot. I hope we meet again outside of Phaedrian, Miss Rosanna. His farewell was cordial, yet laced with an undercurrent of something more profound. Good afternoon, Rosanna. And you, White Magician. Sylvia stormed over, ready for a confrontation, but Orca had already made his brief farewells and departed. This sudden deflation left Sylvia feeling rather anticlimactic. What was that all about? She wondered aloud. He was probably quite shocked after being rejected by Miss Rosanna. Ollie offered, visibly relieved. Rejected? What do you mean? Sylvia pressed, but seeing Rosanna's reluctance to answer, she shifted her focus to Rosanna's health. Are you feeling all right? Rosanna stroked Sylvia's hair, the gesture always bringing her younger brother to mind. Can I keep the ribbon you used to tie my hair? Sylvia asked. Although he hadn't sensed anything amiss with it, Ollie decided to examine it more closely, just in case. Upon returning to the annex, a servant delivered a letter from Noel. The final line read, "I await your arrival, along with someone precious to you." Enclosed was a lock of golden hair. Rosanna's mind raced. She had transmigrated into this novel, becoming a member of the villainous Agrish family. To survive, she had saved the heroine's brother from her own father, altering the heroine's destined path. Yet, her own fate seemed to be mirroring the original heroine's. Barely settled at Heroine, another male lead, Noel, had extended an invitation. "I await your arrival, along with someone precious to you," accompanied by a lock of golden hair. A wave of unease washed over Rosanna. Her instinct screamed that this wasn't her mother's hair. Shara was under Emily's protection. Regardless of whether she chose to stay with the Agrishes, Shara couldn't possibly be in Noel Bitem's territory. Emily hadn't sent any distress signal. The Noel in the novel was two-faced, innocent as a child on one side, utterly depraved on the other. Did he think a simple threat would send her running? Tapping her fingers on the table, Rosanna decided to send her poisoned butterflies to the border, contacting her Agrish connections to confirm her suspicions. If Baitim was truly using her mother's hair as leverage, Rosanna would make him pay dearly. Days later, the reply arrived. Seeing the name within, Rosanna's blood ran cold. Crumpling the letter in her fist, she knew she had to go. Cassis, preparing to attend the Five Families meeting, came to bid her farewell. "Just like you said, if someone else had found me that day, I might have gone with them. But if it wasn't you, I wouldn't be grateful to be alive." Cassis's eyes rippled with emotion at her words. "I didn't mean anything by it," Rosanna said, her tone casual. "I just wanted to tell you." Cassis pulled her into a tight embrace. "Rosanna, if I hadn't found you that day, I would have searched the world for you. And if you ever disappear from my sight again, I'll turn the world upside down to find you." His voice was firm, resolute. "So do whatever you need to do." Rosanna knew, with absolute certainty, that wherever she went, she would always return to him. After Cassis's departure, Rosanna decided to accept the envoy from Baitim and visit for a time. Noel had intended a secret meeting, but Rosanna refused to play by his rules. She replied, demanding he send an escort. This way, he couldn't make unreasonable demands, nor could he act recklessly. Sylvia, worried for Rosanna's safety, urged her to wait for Cassis's return. "I'm sorry, Miss Heroine," the envoy interjected, "but our lord has only extended the invitation to Miss Rosanna." Sylvia scowled, her demeanor a stark contrast to the sweet affection she showed Rosanna. "I'll be back soon," Rosanna reassured her. Before leaving, she said her goodbyes to Joan and Sylvia. "She is a valued guest of Heroine. I trust she will be treated well during her stay in Baitim," Joan stated, her gaze fixed on the envoy. Dante, the envoy, lowered his head. "Understood," he replied, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. The journey to Baitim was quiet. If Orca's interest stemmed from the poisoned butterflies, what was Noel's motive? In the original story, Rosanna, following Lance's orders, had attempted to seduce Sylvia's men, failing miserably. But why were they now approaching her without any prompting? The thought irritated her. The moment she left Heroine, she began to miss Cassis, longing for a swift resolution in Baitim so she could return. "Welcome to Baitim, Miss Rosanna." The carriage door opened, and a flurry of petals swirled inside, revealing a landscape awash in flowers. Servants bowed low in greeting. The warm, vibrant scene only deepened a furrow in Rosanna's brow. Dante instructed a maid to escort Rosanna to her quarters, promising to discuss the letter later. The maid trailed behind her, a fixed, unervingly cheerful smile plastered on her face. Rosanna was led to a room dripping in opulent excess. As soon as the maid left, Rosanna released her poisoned butterflies, dispatching them to investigate every corner of the estate. She needed to know what Noel was planning and where he was keeping the bait he'd used to lure her here. She touched the numerous earrings in her left ear, a gift from her sister, finding no trace of tampering. Pulling back the curtains, she gazed upon the idyllic landscape, her expression remaining impassive. Meanwhile, Noel was indulging in a preening frenzy, sifting through hundreds of outfits. Servants bustled about, preparing for a grand feast, each wearing a mask, ensuring Rosanna wouldn't easily find who she was looking for. "Excuse me, miss," a group of maids announced, entering the room with an array of lavish gowns and matching jewelry. After trying on several, Rosanna settled on the first one, a pristine white dress. Well then, the earrings should match the necklace. Noel addressed the maid attending to his jewelry with a chilling detachment. As the maid's hand reached for his left ear, a soft gasp escaped Rosanna's lips. Instantly, the maid dropped to her knees, stammering apologies. Blood welled up on Rosanna's earlobe, startling the other servants in the room. Rosanna, having been rather unceremoniously summoned to this banquet by the head of the Beytim family, decided not to make a fuss over the maid's clumsiness. After all, the injury was self-inflicted, a subtle maneuver to prevent them from replacing her own earrings. Dante escorted her into the ballroom. "Welcome to Beytim's masquerade," he announced. A figure dramatically bowed before her, offering a gift to the beautiful lady of the evening. With exaggerated flourish, as if performing in a play, he presented Rosanna with a mask. Resisting the urge to smash the mask, Rosanna placed it over her face. Her curiosity about Beytim, and perhaps a touch of morbid fascination, compelled her to play along with this bizarre charade. She already suspected the true reason for the unsettling atmosphere. Most of the castle's inhabitants were puppets. From the maids to the dancers swirling across the floor, they moved with an uncanny stillness. As she approached, they parted, creating a path for her entrance. From the center of the dance floor, a figure called out to her with an unsettling enthusiasm. "Luna, welcome to my kingdom. It's so wonderful to see you again. You have no idea how much I've missed you." Rosanna tilted her head, a flicker of unease in her eyes. The letter had clearly stated her name. He hadn't mistaken her identity. This strange, almost possessive way of addressing her, as if naming a doll, made her skin crawl. Noel, oblivious to her discomfort, seemed lost in his own excitement. He strode towards her, taking her hand. "You can't imagine how much I've anticipated this moment. First, I want to show you the gift I prepared. Dante tells me you're quite eager to see it." He beamed, his demeanor a stark contrast to the menacing tone of his letter. "Nix," he called out, turning his head. "Honestly, Noel, I should have made my grand entrance last. What fun is there in the rest of the evening now?" The newcomer was the same person who had presented Rosanna with the mask. "But Luna is curious, aren't you?" he said, obliging Noel's request and removing his mask. The face revealed was strikingly beautiful, with one eye a vibrant violet red and the other a deep blue. It was the face of Rosanna's brother, as, "It's been a while, Rosanna. I've missed you so much, my dear sister." If Lan had been present at that moment, Rosanna would have gladly stabbed him. After leaving Phaedrian, Orca hadn't gone home. Instead, he lurked near the border, waiting to ambush Rosanna. His driver had been instructed to lure her out and capture her. Any magical creature that caught his eye was usually stolen, its magician disposed of. Now, he'd set his sights on Rosanna. The fact that she belonged to Cassis only fueled his obsession. Unmoved by her rejection, he planned to make his move that night before attending the Five Families meeting. But a sudden chill at the back of his neck brought his plans to an abrupt halt. He slumped to the ground, unconscious. Cassis looked down at the prone figure with cold disdain. This scoundrel. I suppose it was his familiar that helped him conceal himself. Cassis had been suspicious of Orca ever since he'd so readily agreed to leave. To think he would dare to try something like this after being shown such leniency. Cassis, without hesitation, ripped the gemstone from Orca's neck, crushing it to dust. The act freed Orca's familiars, no doubt sending them into a frenzy of grief and confusion. Resisting the urge to dump Orca in some remote wilderness, Cassis bound him tightly with rope, hoisting him over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. He tossed the unconscious Orca to his subordinates, informed the Wyperian family that he was rescued by Phaedrian on the way to the meeting. His men, feigning ignorance of Cassis's actions, obeyed without question. Cassis glanced towards Phaedrian. Rosanna would be leaving for Beytim soon. He would deal with his own affairs and then go to retrieve her as quickly as possible. He had transmigrated into this novel, becoming a member of a villainous family. The only person who had shown him kindness, his bright and cheerful brother, had not only been executed by their father, but had been turned into a puppet and placed before him. "Are you saying you're really Az?" The young man before her was identical to the 16-year-old Az, as if frozen in time. He skillfully avoided answering her question directly, claiming only that Noel had revived his deceased body, but that he had no memories of his former life. Rosanna felt a chilling disconnect. He looked like her brother, yet something was fundamentally different. To revive a dead body, it wasn't puppetry, but necromancy. Noel, watching them with a disturbingly cheerful expression, interjected. It's not quite like that. Puppetry and necromancy are based on different principles. If you're curious, I'd be happy to explain in detail. It's wonderful, Nyx. You used to be called as. Seeing you two together is so visually appealing. Truly perfect. He gazed at them with an unsettlingly innocent smile, his laughter echoing through the ballroom. The other guests began to applaud, as if watching a performance. Rosanna's icy glare at Noel bade him silenced his clapping. Tonight's festivities end here. Rosanna's declaration wasn't a suggestion or a plea for understanding. It was a unilateral decree. The unspoken addendum, "We'll talk tomorrow," hung heavy in the air as she swept out of the ballroom. Noel stood, mouth agape, utterly bewildered. The cheerful music died away, and the crowd dispersed like a receding tide. A flush of humiliation crept up his neck. One moment he was basking in the meticulously planned spectacle, happily orchestrating the evening's entertainment. The next he was abandoned, left standing alone in the echoing silence. "Dante," he finally managed, "explain this to me." Dante glanced discreetly at Nyx, who was lounging nonchalantly, sipping wine, the discarded mask crushed beneath his heel. Catching Dante's eye, Nyx offered a languid smile. Dante frowned at the sight. Nyx's aloofness was nothing new, but his unhelpful silence in this particular instance was irritating. "Even if you ask me, I have no idea," Dante replied, carefully choosing his words. "I was stationed by the door. I saw." He paused, tempering his usual sarcasm in deference to Noel's foul mood. Luna seemed displeased. She said, "We'll talk tomorrow," and retired to her room. Dante tilted his head, observing Noel's increasingly troubled expression. Perhaps she's fatigued from her journey? Noel shook his head, anxiety gnawing at him. No, it wasn't like that. She seemed genuinely angry. She looked at me with such coldness. I only introduced her to Nyx. He turned accusingly to Dante. "Did you do something to upset Luna?" "Why me?" Dante asked, feeling unjustly targeted. "Because you've been with her since Phaedrian," Noel insisted, "and you're always saying infuriating things. Explain yourself. I might forgive you." Dante felt a surge of exasperation. Rosanna was already upset before I arrived. "Is that so?" Noel mused. "Then it must be Phaedrian's fault for upsetting her. I won't let them get away with this." Then a flicker of doubt crossed his face. "But if Miss Rosanna is upset, isn't it because of you?" Dante, emboldened by desperation, dared to speak the truth. Noel looked utterly perplexed. He had, after all, meticulously prepared a gift and a welcoming party. Dante regarded him with a mixture of pity and amusement. "Think about it logically," he sighed. "She's obviously upset about the letter you sent. No matter how you try to dress it up, it was a thinly veiled threat. Who wouldn't be upset receiving something like that? A threat? How can you call a threat?" Noel stammered, flustered. "I had no such intention." Dante looked at him, regretting his earlier attempt at reason. "You wouldn't listen to me when I told you not to send it, and now you regret it. See? It is your fault." Noel, faced with this unexpected accusation, deflected with surprising agility. "But it was you who wrote it." Dante's mind flashed back to the 3 days and nights he'd spent trying to decipher Noel's rambling, incoherent draft. "I merely refined what you wanted to say," he retorted. "You know your writing is, well, let's just say it needed improvement. And why did you include a lock of hair? It's not a curse, you know." It was frankly creepy. Noel, seemingly incapable of self-reflection, remained unmoved. "Nyx's hair is as beautiful as Luna's," he explained. "So, by including the hair, Luna would surely recognize him." Dante felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. There was no cure for this level of obliviousness. "Sending that lock of hair was pointless," he said wearily. "You might as well have sent a pair of blue eyes or a scarred right hand." Noel gasped dramatically. "How could you? You're so cruel. You wicked fiend." Frankly, Dante chuckled dryly. It's a miracle she even came after receiving that letter. Noel, growing increasingly agitated, decided to seek answers elsewhere. He finally learned from one of the puppet maids that Rosanna's ear had been injured while she was changing clothes, but that she had forgiven the maid. Relief washed over Noel. So, it wasn't the letter after all. A smile returned to his face. "Thank you for telling me the truth," he said, his good mood restored. "However," he added, brandishing his mask, "you ruined my reunion with Luna. How will you make amends?" With each swing of the mask, chunks of flesh and fabric flew from the unfortunate puppets. Unable to move without a direct command, they could only offer silent, motionless apologies. They dared not even feign human pleas for mercy. Dante tried to persuade Nyx to return to his room, but Nyx, predictably, ignored him. Instead, he deliberately dropped his wine glass, the shattering crystal interrupting Noel's tirade. Noel turned, looking thoughtfully at Nyx. Come to think of it, he mused, Luna didn't seem as happy to see you as I had imagined. The sight of her deceased brother, resurrected as a puppet, had understandably shaken Rosanna. Overwhelmed, she had retreated to her room to process the shock. Meanwhile, Noel, determined to find an external reason for her displeasure, continued his quest for answers. In the end, it was Nyx who stepped in to soothe his anxieties. Rosanna was clearly shaken by seeing me, he said smoothly. Seeing her deceased brother would naturally be a shock. She simply needs time. You must understand. Don't worry. Eventually, everything will go as you wish. The soothing words wrapped around Noel like a comforting balm, his anger dissipating. The art of manipulation, wielded expertly by a puppet. Noel's naive smile returned. The two decided to retire for the night, determined to be at their best to greet Rosanna in the morning. Before leaving, Nyx glanced back at Dante, a chillingly cold look in his eyes. Oh, and Dante, Noel called out, dispose of those puppets where I won't have to see them. I can't bear the sight of such failures. Dante sighed, left alone to clean up the mess, both literal and metaphorical. I came here myself to confirm whether, as is really here. Rosanna sat stiffly in the darkened room, her outward composure a stark contrast to the turmoil within. She was certain the Agrishas were involved in Bidem's schemes. She raised a hand to her left ear. The wound had healed cleanly. She pricked her finger with her earring. A moment later, the small puncture vanished. The sensation was strangely comforting, like having Cassis close by. Before the five families' meeting began, Jeremy waited at the entrance. Cassis, with his limited capacity for politeness, offered a friendly greeting. Long time no see, young master of Phaedrian. What a surprise. I didn't expect to see you here. Cassis paused, returning the pleasantries. I'm the head of the Agrish family now. Of course I have to be here. He spoke confidently, though his words lacked true conviction. After all, the family was little more than a hollow shell. It seems you're quite satisfied with your current position, Cassis remarked with a sardonic smile. Jeremy bit back a sharp retort. As much as he loathed Cassis, he wasn't here to start a fight. Young master of Phaedrian, he began, have you seen any other Agrishas besides myself recently? He longed to know his sister's whereabouts. Even if he couldn't see her, he wanted to hear from someone that she was well. But Cassis, ever evasive, danced around the subject. It seems this head of house title doesn't suit you, he taunted, ignoring Jeremy's question. Jeremy barely contained his fury and turned to enter the meeting. The tedious proceedings concluded quickly, yielding no significant results. As everyone prepared to depart, Cassis spotted the Baitim envoy. Excusing himself from his father, he decided to postpone his return home. Resorting to his old tricks, he knocked the Baitim envoy unconscious. He intended to personally escort him back. Isidore, by his side, was unfazed by this now familiar routine. The Baitim envoy seems to have collapsed from exhaustion after his long journey, he remarked smoothly. Without complaint, he hoisted the unconscious envoy onto his back, delivering him to the meeting organizers before following Cassis to Baitim, ostensibly to convey the meeting's key points. Noel didn't get to see Rosanna. Overjoyed by the news of her arrival, he had stayed up for days, and now, even the heavens couldn't rouse him from his slumber. So, Nyx went to see Rosanna instead. You've come for nothing. I have nothing to say to you. Seeing the puppet, Rosanna rose to dismiss him. Is that so? Nyx replied, on the contrary, I believe Noel's absence will allow us to speak more freely. Rosanna paused at his words. Are you suggesting you're more honest than Noel? Perhaps you can actually answer my questions. Seeing her hesitation, Nyx poured her tea and offered her sweets. Try some. I hope you have a sweet tooth. I made these myself. I guarantee they're delicious. Rosanna's gaze fell on the scar on the back of his hand. You made these yourself? She asked. She took a sip of tea, her assessment blunt. What is this? It's sickeningly sweet. Is that so? I apologize. I thought you would enjoy something sweet. I seem to have been mistaken. Rosanna listened to his words, silently pouring herself another cup. His smile, unlike the other puppets, was natural, almost human. There was something unsettlingly familiar about him. It reminded her of her childhood, when all the Agrish children were forced to develop a tolerance to poison. Their mother often laced their sweets with toxins. Seeing him so close, Rosanna felt a strange sensation, like encountering someone she hadn't seen in years. She gave a faint smile. A puppet experiencing emotions. How amusing. Do you believe that not only the body, but the soul as well? Nix, now going by, as continued. Master said it was Noel's order to pretend to be as, to make you stay. But my memories begin when I open my eyes. I don't know how to pretend to be as. Puppetry is a complex art. I can't explain it to you, but I was happy to see you. My desire to see you at the banquet last night was genuine. I came today not because of orders, but because I wanted to see you alone. I heard about you from Noel and became curious. He looked directly into Rosanna's eyes, his expression sincere. Curious. A puppet with curiosity. I find that incredible, Rosanna replied, her eyes flickering. Encouraged by her reaction, he pressed on. It's true. From the moment I opened my eyes, I've been curious about what I was like before I was reborn. I'm different from other puppets. I can feel emotions. I can feel a real heart beating in my chest. Dante calls me defective. Do you think I'm human or a puppet? How much of this makes up who I am now? I don't know. Do you have an answer? Rosanna remained silent, confronted by a puppet questioning its own existence. This puppet was undeniably different. Finally, Nix, observing Rosanna's silence, offered a casual smile. You could stay here for a few days. Observing me wouldn't be a bad idea. Since you accepted the invitation, you should at least hear Noel's explanation. He tilted his head, his handsome face and gentle tone conveying a disarming innocence. Rosanna set down her teacup. While intriguing, she said, "It's not worth my time. Bring me a different tea tomorrow. This is too sweet. I don't like it." Rosanna rose to leave, feigning reluctance. Despite her words, she had indirectly accepted Nix's request. Dante entered, inquiring about the outcome of their conversation. Nix, leisurely sipping his tea, replied, "Just as I predicted, she said she'll stay a few more days." A sudden burst of laughter erupted from him. Truly, humans are so foolish. Rosanna, upon hearing that her brother appeared in Baitim, accepted the invitation and came here, only to discover it's merely a puppet made from her brother's body. I tricked her with flowery words into staying a few days, and yet behind her back, I call her foolish. I feigned indifference, and yet she wavered because of the fabricated words and actions I presented. Such a shallow display of affection makes her linger. There's a soundproofing spell around the drawing room table. Even if Rosanna's poisonous butterflies came, they wouldn't hear anything. Dante, standing outside the spell's perimeter, frowned at the puppet, though he remained silent. The original owner of this body seems to have been quite close to her. It gives me an opportunity to exploit her weakness. Just now, I deliberately imitated Az. Although I don't know what kind of person Az was, while I was carrying out the order to leave Baitim and find Rosanna, I went to Agrish and kidnapped someone who escaped from there. I managed to extract some information about Az. He mused. In his eyes, the gentle Az was simply weak. I specifically prepared sweets for Rosanna. I could see from her expression that she relaxed slightly while eating them. Wasn't it said that the poison would react with just a small amount? Yet, that woman walked out of the drawing room perfectly fine. Perhaps I should increase the dosage tomorrow, Nick said with a smile. He relished the thought of seeing Rosanna's beautiful face stained with sorrow. I plan to give Noel the gift he desires. And when he's at his happiest, I'll destroy everything he's gained. I wonder what expression Noel will make if I laugh in his face then. A mischievous, childlike smile spread across Nix's face. Dante, who loathed that expression, shuddered. I don't know what you're thinking, but it sends chills down my spine. It must be a demon residing within you, he muttered. Thank you for the compliment, but be careful what you say. When Luna, whom Noel adores, was still around, wasn't I his kind older brother? He rose with a flourish, patted Dante's shoulder, and slipped out of the drawing room. Luna, I'm so sorry. I intended to see you first thing this morning, but I stayed up for days preparing for your arrival and ended up oversleeping. And Dante didn't wake me either. He deftly shifted the blame onto Dante. He hurried off to find Rosanna, feigning panic. Sensing Noel's frantic worry and his constant efforts to please her, Rosanna decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. She greeted him with a smile. Why apologize? The day isn't over yet. You've arrived at the perfect time. I was just thinking about your puppet. Seeing the beautiful woman smile, Noel beamed, his previous coldness forgotten. Oh, what was the name of my puppet again? Ah, Nix. He finally recalled. "I have a question for you," Rosanna said, extending her hand as if beckoning him closer. "You can ask me anything," he replied, blushing as he approached. He took her hand and knelt on one knee, momentarily resembling Jeremy. But Rosanna still harbored a dislike for Noel. Masking her inner coldness, she gently caressed his cheek. "I'd like you to explain in detail how you created Nyx." At the time, I was researching whether it was possible to create puppets using the flesh of living beings. During that period, Dante Agrish expressed interest in Bidem's puppetry and attempted to approach our family. He pestered me for a meeting, so I spared him some time. But I didn't listen carefully to what he said, and I don't remember the specifics. I only recall suddenly mentioning my research on puppets. He offered to help me and later provided me with a body. A chill ran down Rosanna's spine. Just as she suspected, this body belonged to Az. Otherwise, there would be no need to replicate the scar on his hand and the injury to his left eye. To be honest, when Dante initially offered to give me a beautiful body, I had no expectations. But after receiving it, I fell in love at first sight. A glacial coldness flickered in Rosanna's eyes. Could it be that Dante harmed as to fulfill Noel's request? Rosanna's hand slowly slid to his neck. "Did you ever meet as when he was alive?" Noel maintained his smile, but Rosanna's grip tightened. "No, I only saw the body. I discovered an angelic being. To see him open his eyes, I devoted myself even more to my research." He looked at Rosanna like a child seeking praise. He continued to explain the intricacies of puppetry to her, seemingly forgetting his deception about using Nyx to impersonate, as in keep Rosanna in Beitim. "I heard you've decided to stay a while longer. You're welcome here. Luna, you can stay here as long as you wish." Rosanna couldn't bring herself to respond to his hopeful words. "I'll only stay for 2 days." The next day, Nyx brought the poison tea again. Rosanna, though she hid it, didn't expose him. She wanted to see him panic when his plan failed, only to feign composure. For the first time, Rosanna felt a wave of disgust wash over her as she looked at Az's face. "Are those artificial eyes?" Rosanna mused aloud. I heard my body was damaged, so Noel worked hard to find suitable eyes and put them in. He really went to great lengths to recreate Az's appearance. Meanwhile, Rosanna continued to search for differences between Nyx and her true brother. "I've always wondered why Az died." Nyx thought, "Should I have died? Was I really that useless?" "You weren't useless. My brother wasn't useless." Rosanna set down her teacup. "Today's tea isn't good either. Only tomorrow is left. I hope it won't disappoint." Rosanna had come to Beitim because she'd heard her deceased brother had appeared there. But this brother had tried to poison her for 2 days straight. How strange, Nyx thought, bewildered. Today's dose was double yesterday's. How is she still fine? He wondered if he'd bought fake poison and wanted to test it on someone. He decided to try it on Dante. Even at his top speed, Dante couldn't catch him. By the time he arrived at the scene, it was too late. Nyx had grabbed someone by the collar and was force-feeding them poisoned cookies. The person in his grasp quickly lost focus in their eyes. "See, it works perfectly fine. What are you so worked up about?" Nyx asked, a smug look on his face. Dante, witnessing the scene, felt like he was going insane. He had a massive headache thinking about how to deal with this. "I was just confirming its effectiveness. It's not lethal. The worst that can happen is they become an idiot." Nyx scoffed, his mood actually improving after confirming the poison worked. A crowd had gathered, denouncing Nyx. Noel, however, cared more for his puppets than for people. Beitim was now divided into 2 areas. The front yard belonged to Noel, Dante, and the puppets. The humans of Beitim, bullied by the puppets, had all moved to the backyard. Now, this crowd hurled insults, practically wanting to tear Nyx apart. "Yes, I'm a puppet. You are the great humans, but you're no better than me. No matter how self-righteous you are, you're still God's failed creations." Nyx laughed, taunting them. "Unfortunately for you, Noel values me more. Even if I kill someone, he won't do anything to me." Dante intervened, and Nyx could only warn him not to provoke them further. Acting like he was in charge, Nyx patted Dante's shoulder. Leaving the cleanup to Dante, he walked away. Rosanna was strolling with Noel. Through her butterflies, she'd witnessed the conflict. Intrigued, she wanted to get a closer look, but Noel panicked, claiming the backyard belonged to others, and he rarely went there. He tried so hard to change the subject, suggesting they go elsewhere, that Rosanna lost interest. In an attempt to keep her entertained, Noelle prepared various fruits and drinks, behaving like a clueless, rich, second-generation protagonist from a television drama. Rosanna remained wary. Everything felt artificial. "It seems my maids have disappeared," she remarked casually. "Oh, I heard there was a mistake, so they were replaced. If you like, I can have them reassigned," Noelle replied nonchalantly. To him, the puppets were all interchangeable. It wasn't difficult to alter their faces and swap their bodies. "There's no need to bother. I'm leaving tomorrow anyway." At that moment, Noelle's face fell, his disappointment evident. "Are all the workers here puppets?" Rosanna continued, seemingly oblivious to his change in mood. Noelle was surprised. How did she know? He himself seemed unable to detect the puppet's artificial smiles. His hands turned icy. The puppet massaging his shoulders hesitated for a long moment before stopping. The other puppets became even more cautious, avoiding contact with him. "Then I'll start researching how to create puppets with body heat," Noelle thought, finding a new research goal. "It's my last day here. It's a shame we didn't have more time for deeper conversation." Nix, maintaining his docile facade, poured the tea. But Rosanna had already seen his true face through her butterflies. She gently stroked the teacup, not rushing to drink. After adding 3 sugar cubes, a long silence stretched between them. "If you have anything you want to say, you can say it now," Nix finally urged, his voice gentle, but his gaze fixed on her hand. "Something I want to say to you?" Rosanna echoed. "My appearance is the same as Ass. Since he died suddenly, you must have things you didn't get to say to your brother, so you can treat me like him." His voice was soft, but Rosanna sensed the malice within. She now understood why she felt a flicker of fear upon first seeing him. He'd been trying to manipulate her from the start. He was like a puppeteer pulling the strings, playing with others for his own amusement. "Do you know why I stayed to observe you?" she asked, not waiting for his reply. "Do you think it's because I'm interested in you having as body, or because I find comfort in seeing you alive?" A bright smile spread across her face. Nix's own smile froze. "I was wondering whether to kill you or leave you be." The killing intent in her eyes left Nix speechless. "What do you mean?" Nix asked, feigning innocence. "Have I said something to upset you?" "Yes," Rosanna stated flatly. "You don't have to act anymore. No matter how hard you try, you're not him." With a decisive gesture, she poured her tea onto the table. "Today's new poison," she continued, her voice laced with ice. "I'm more familiar with it than you are. As a puppet, you're very good at lying. Truly a one-of-a-kind Git puppet. Though compared to Git, calling you a failed experiment is more fitting." The barb struck home. Nix's expression twisted, his eyes hardening. Rosanna's angelic brother, after his untimely death, had been transformed into a puppet, and now a devil resided within his shell. On her last day in Beitim, Rosanna ripped away his carefully constructed mask. He had always believed himself to be special, unique. To be called a failure was unbearable. "In my eyes," Rosanna continued, her voice a low murmur, "you're nothing more than a mutated puppet, a mistake Noelle made." The spilled tea began to evaporate, unnoticed by Nix. He was utterly shaken by her words, his attention fixated on her. "Ah," he choked out, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "No one has ever dared to speak to me like this and live to tell the tale. What did you know I was poisoning you?" "From the beginning," Rosanna replied, meeting his venomous gaze without flinching. Only then did a flicker of satisfaction cross Nix's face. "Was it your master's order, or your own volition?" Rosanna pressed, knowing he was the only one who could act against Noelle's wishes. The thought crossed her mind. If Noelle ordered this to keep me here, I won't forgive such a despicable act. Weren't you just so arrogantly deciding whether to kill me or not?" Rosanna taunted. "Why ask me? Is arrogance a human trait? Do you really think you can kill me?" Nix sneered, utterly confident in his own abilities. "Of course," Rosanna replied, her demeanor still unervingly calm. It shouldn't be too difficult. Her nonchalance infuriated Nix. He wanted to crush her, to extinguish the defiant spark in her eyes. "You wouldn't happen to be relying on that earring, would you?" he snarled. With lightning speed, he snatched a knife from the table and flung it. It grazed Rosanna's ear, embedding itself in the wall behind her. The shattered earring and a bead of blood landed on her shoulder. Her expression remained unchanged, but her gaze turned glacial. Nix felt a surge of triumph. So that's why the poison didn't work. He had noticed she always wore that earring, never changing it. Hearing his puppets gossip about it had only deepened his suspicions. All you have is that earring and that butterfly dress, he hissed. Noel wouldn't like you getting hurt, but just imagine he'd be satisfied just holding your corpse. A cruel smile twisted his lips. Before Rosanna could even mention the dress, Nyx activated his magic eye. Crimson symbols flickered within his violet pupils. But in the next instant, he coughed, blood splattering across the white tablecloth and his clothes. He clutched his mouth, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stared at Rosanna. She rose gracefully and walked towards him. No wonder, she murmured. I thought it strange there weren't any devices in the room. So your eyes are the medium. Nyx remained wary, the backlash from his failed spell throbbing through him. He glared at Rosanna, who remained perfectly unharmed. You think you're clever, she continued, her voice soft yet cutting. But I wore the earring on purpose. It's blocking you from accessing my things. They're hidden where you can't see them. You only see what I want you to see. How foolish. You? Nyx seethed, realizing he'd been played. He stared at her, venomous rage burning in his eyes. Even now, aren't you curious why no one has come in? He finally registered the commotion outside, having been too consumed by his confrontation with Rosanna to notice. Suddenly, butterflies materialized around her. Nyx tensed, expecting attack. He desperately wanted to know what was happening outside. Why Dante, who was always watching the drawing room, hadn't appeared. Thankfully, the internal injuries from the backlash were beginning to subside. Oh, don't be afraid, Rosanna purred. They're not for you. Listen closely, Nyx. You're weaker and more foolish than I am. You didn't need to reveal your poison butterflies. Her voice was as cold as ice. I despise these eyes. Before Nyx could react, Rosanna moved with blinding speed. Her hand shot out, a blur of motion, and pierced his left eye. The chaos outside had erupted because Nyx had gone unpunished for poisoning the humans. Noel had refused to speak with their families. But the next day, he was seen carrying another corpse, another resident of Beitim. Oops! A clear voice rang out, sharp and mocking. I've been found out. That was the spark that ignited the powder keg. The enraged humans, chasing after Nyx, stormed Noel's main residence, smashing every puppet in sight. The illusions created by the poisoned butterflies vanished. Has it begun? Outside Beitim, Griselda, concealed within a magic circle, watched the walls of the city. The sounds of the riot echoed in the air. I only came here because I thought it would be interesting, she mused. I wonder if I'll get a chance to show off my skills. Suddenly, she spotted a man moving with the swift grace of a seasoned assassin. He scanned the surroundings, his brow furrowed, as if searching for something. Finally, he spoke. Excuse me, is Lady Griselda Grish nearby? He startled, but a closer look revealed a familiar figure. The eye patch, the bearing, a Phaedrian man. You were sent by Cassis, he stated, recognition dawning. Inside Beitim, Noel received the news that his relatives were smashing his puppets. A pang of distress shot through him. Why are Nyx and the others bothering them? I already gave them the antidote. Dante, he called out, his voice tight with anxiety. If there's a problem, they should go to Dante. He's already there. He is, a puppet replied. How many puppets have been broken? Noel demanded. We've heard reports of around 50 so far, the puppet answered. Noel's eyes reddened. These people, how dare they use violence against non-combatant children? Go to Warehouse 2 and bring out the puppets there, he ordered, his voice shaking with rage. He seemed to have forgotten that just 3 days prior, he had personally smashed several of Rosanna's puppets. He stormed out, trying to keep his movements quiet. He didn't want Rosanna to hear about this. Didn't want her to misunderstand. I must protect the beautiful Beitim, prevent these thugs from disturbing Rosanna. Midway down the hall, he heard Rosanna's name mentioned, and a flicker of fire ignited in his injured eye. Quickly, bring the healing puppet, Dante. He can't die. Forgetting his earlier caution, he raced down the stairs. Just then, another puppet called out to him. Master Noel, Dante. Noel cut him off. I know, I'm going now. But this puppet was the gatekeeper. Dante usually handled these matters. Unable to find Dante, the puppet had come to Noel. Having delivered his master's message, he returned to the main gate of Beitim, a placid smile on his face. Master Noel said he'll be right there, he informed the waiting man. Seeing no reason to obstruct the delivery of the 5 families' meeting details, the puppet immediately allowed Cassis to enter Beitim. Please, this way. I'll take you. Cassis interrupted. I know where it is. Meanwhile, Rosanna held Nyx's red eyeball in her hand. With a slight pressure, she crushed it. "I'm Noelle's puppet," Nyx hissed, desperation creeping into his voice. "You're just a guest. There will be consequences for attacking me." All he could do now was threaten, searching for Rosanna's weakness. But he failed. His only option was to escape. Yet, the hallway outside was